So, how long ago was this? A couple months? I can't remember. We were hanging out here at the old Tim Cassidy's right before the show, and I'd made a comment about fertility rates being low, but among conservatives still around like 1.8, to which I think it was Phil Labonte responded that Catholics have a higher than replacement rate fertility at like 2.4. And then I was like, is that true? And Mary Morgan was also on the show, and then I think she mentioned something about divorce rates are also really low. And then I jokingly said, Catholics are the superior Christians. And to which everyone chuckled, and I antagonistically said, should I tweet that? Because I just knew it would cause a storm, ish storm. And then Mary and Phil both said yes. And I was like, okay, so I did. And here we are now. Do I have the, we don't have the, I can pull, well, whatever, we don't have the tweet pulled up. But now we're actually going to have that debate because admittedly, I am a lapsed Catholic. I was 10 years old when my family left the church. So what do I know? So I brought in a handful of gentlemen to have this conversation and have this debate over the religion, the denomination. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, Jay Dyer. I host the Alex Jones Show. Have done that for the last 5 years, write for the Sam Hyde Show, doing comedy. I've debated all the top atheists, Muslims that are out there, and looking forward to this one.
Right on.
I'm Aiden Mattis. I'm the host of The Lore Lodge, the Weird Bible and History Unhinged on YouTube, and I have not debated all that many people, so this is going to be an interesting day for me.
I'm Timothy Gordon. I'm the representative of the superior religion here today. You know me from YouTube. Rules for Retrogrades is the name of the show. I'm the author of 5 books, and I'm excited to defend your position that you meant totally literally today. Can we just end with that?
So, well, let's start with why it's not the superior religion. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So I used to be Catholic.
What are you now?
Orthodox. Been Orthodox for the past 8 years, Orthodox Christian. So I think there's some key things that stand out as the reason why Catholicism is not superior. One would be the contradictions that I think have occurred in Catholic dogma, particularly after the first millennium. You have the notion that the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop is necessary for salvation from the time of Dictatus Papae in 1090 all the way up to 1302 Unum Sanctum. So you have to believe that the Pope has basically Kwisatz Haderach type status. He's the world emperor. And if you don't believe that, you will lose your salvation. So that was clear dogma in the Middle Ages. Nowadays, post-Vatican II, when we go to the documents of Vatican II, that is no longer even mentioned. In fact, it's de-emphasized. And in fact, many of the Vatican II popes have called for the de-Catholicizing of various Christian states. So one would be that there's a contradiction there. The relationship of the church to the other religions. For example, in the Middle Ages, you have the condemnation of Muslims at the Council of Vienna as the abominable sect of Muhammad. Nowadays, post-Vatican II, post-ecumenism, post-Nostra Aetate, which are Vatican II documents, not only is Islam a salvific religion, we can actually go and pray in the mosques towards Mecca, which the last several popes have done, exemplifying their faith.
Catholics can do that?
They can now.
Oh.
There's also the Abu Dhabi Faith Center, which has been built. Now, and I'm sure Tim's going to take issue with whether you actually can, but the Vatican II documents actually do promote, especially the Vatican II ecumenist documents, the notion that we can participate with and engage in interreligious faith ceremonies and dialogue, which is in direct contradiction to Mortalium Animos in 1929 from Pius XI, which says that to do so is, quote, the surrendering of the faith. So these are a couple contradictions. There's many more. The death penalty has recently been changed according to Catholic catechism. Now, according to Pope Francis, it is, quote, contrary to the gospel. If you go back to the Catechism of Trent, it was said to be part of natural justice or natural law. So certainly nobody would believe that the papacy can change or alter natural law.
But is the implication then that the Orthodox Church is static? It doesn't change?
Yes, we would argue that the first 1,000 years of Christianity, as you look at it from the council's perspective and the canon law and the church fathers' teachings, that the Orthodox Church is absolutely synonymous with that church. So it's exactly the same as the first 1,000 years of Christianity. Rome and the papacy is what has departed, particularly in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries.
What about you? What denomination are you?
So I have been a Methodist for many years. I've recently began inquiring into the Anglican Catholic Church, which is not the Anglican churches in the Church of England, nor is it the Episcopal Church. It actually split off from that in, I want to say, 1978 with the Episcopal Church's decision to begin ordaining women. So it is a conservative Anglican theology. And to be perfectly honest, I don't really disagree with much of what Jay just said. Our church largely does tie itself back to the pre-12th century Christian church, tries to emulate that, and that's kind of the position of the Anglican Catholic Church is we are not the one true church. We are not the perfect representation of Christianity. We are doing our best to retain Christianity prior to councils like the Council of Trent that we felt changed the religion too much. So like Jay said, it's very much the 11th century and back is what we consider to be the unified church.
I have a question, but I'm going to wait until you can state your position on Catholicism.
Great. Catholicism is the one true church. We make this claim based on many premises, but the first ones are this: indefectibility. The church can never defect. It won't defect. Our Lord promised that when the Spirit of truth comes in Scripture, he'll guide you into all truth. In John's Gospel, gates of hell won't prevail against the church. In Matthew's Gospel, in 1 Timothy, the church of the living God is the pillar and bulwark of truth. And therefore, our Lord is a liar if there is some change. And you know, this is a little bit funny because what I'm going to be doing is talking about super specific church terms, religion terms with Jay today. And then we'll be talking about more broad things because really Protestantism isn't technically a religion. It's a faith. But we can talk about things like the ecumenical councils, the first 7 ecumenical councils about which Orthodox and Catholic agree in something like 4 of these first 4 ecumenical councils. I'll read you chapter and verse. But the Orthodox has a view of the Pope, which is the Church's view, the Church's second millennium view of the Pope, and the Orthodox defected on this. Now, Protestants defected. They represent the soul of defectibility. Indefectibility means that nothing's going to change. Protestants are a religion that sprang forth from the earth like Athena from Zeus's head in the 16th century. It's proto-Enlightenment abstract rationalism that's vaguely pro-Jesus. But Orthodox Catholic debates are more specific because we have to talk about what at the very least, the first 7 ecumenical councils require. And the first, second ecumenical councils about which Jay and I agree, if you go to like number 3, Ephesus involves the Patriarch of Constantinople, the highest guy in their second millennium church, being requested to be fired by other Eastern Orthodox guys like Cyril of Alexandria. He writes the Pope and he says, can you excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, because he's saying this absurdism, like unto what many Protestants say today, that Mary's the mother of Jesus, but not God. And so, kind of like Dwight Schrute says in The Office, if you are the guy that's actually boss, you can make a firing. And tons upon tons of first millennium Eastern thinkers from the Eastern lung of the church associated with Orthodoxy, but also Catholic saints like the Cappadocian Fathers, all the Gregories, St. Basil the Great, they acknowledge the unity, the visible sign of unity that is represented on earth by the Pope and the headship of the Pope. Just tons upon tons of these guys and tons upon tons of the councils. Also, Nicaea 2, Constantinople 3, Constantinople 4, we kind of disagree with them about it. And even the Union of Florence at the Council of Florence, which is an ecumenical council, it was called by an emperor. Well, a lot of people don't know this. We had a reunification of the Catholic and the Orthodox churches, and it was a legit unification. 31 out of 33 bishops in whatever it was, 1439, of the Orthodox came and voted for unification, including the Patriarch of Constantinople. And then they went home and essentially they were strong-armed into nullifying the unification. So
let's try and simplify as much as we can, real quick, to make this point, because I do have a question. But is the Orthodox argument is you want to stay true to the original view of Scripture and what it dictates, and is the Catholic view that it can be updated and changed by the political structures of the religion?
Absolutely not. I would say you have that reversed. The Orthodox always being centered in Constantinople were close to the emperor. The first thing Constantine did after he legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan, is he moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. He named the city after himself, which is a badass move, Chad move, and it is Tim City, Constantine City. And so the Orthodox, over the remainder of the first Christian millennium, they had the Patriarch of Constantinople, who would be elevated to the second most powerful under Rome eventually. And they always had, they were next to the emperor. And so they were always alongside the emperor. And of course, there's multiple Orthodox churches, so they don't even agree on things like whether they can't be one, because they can't be true to the gospel, because they don't agree on things like whether you can have divorce, whether you can have contraception. Whereas the Roman Catholic Church, under the single sign of unity, the Pope, which everybody hates, they are kept together. And the second millennium Catholic view of the Pope is exactly what the first millennium view of the Pope was.
But
not at all.
Based on
Ratzinger admits it's not.
so
he was a lefty. Yeah.
Again, I'm not. I don't follow any of the organized religions or anything like that. But real quick, I'm just, the reason I asked the question is different popes have had different positions on cultural issues. I think you mentioned the death penalty just now, but there's also questions of gay marriage and abortion.
There's gay blessings that are allowed in the Francis's encyclical, which was a change from the previous Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which is basically the successor to the Holy Office. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to be rude to Tim, but Tim didn't actually mention or address any of the actual contradictions that I listed. He came up with a list of sort of I would say equivocations on the way that different church fathers use the word head. Basil, in his letters, for example, talks about the Bishop of Antioch being the head of the whole body, the head of the world, because in his region, it was the chief see, right? Because he was dealing with the schism in Antioch. So this flowery language a lot of times is used amongst many of the church fathers. You have at the Seventh Ecumenical Council the phrase, the gates of hell will not prevail against, and then guess what? They use the emperor. I don't think anybody believes that Matthew 16 is about the emperor, but we can find in the Acts of the Councils, if you have like Price's books and whatnot, multiple examples of this sort of language that's used, but that doesn't equate to the idea of Vatican I. And like Tim Pool said, not only do you have changes in practice or praxis, such as the complete revolution in the most holy thing in the Roman Catholic Church, the liturgy itself, you have a Protestantization after Vatican II, a liturgical revolution. That's more important than other types of issues like, can we have the death penalty? And I think for Roman Catholic theology, the liturgy itself is more important, and the post-Vatican II popes have all enforced the dogma of the new Mass. In fact, Francis said in, I think, 2017, I have the reference if anybody wants to look and see, but he said that the reforms of Vatican II are dogmatic, magisterial, and irreformable. That means that you cannot reject any of the things of Vatican II that you don't like, even if you want to debate the status of them. So not only have the morals and the idea has changed and the dogma has changed, even the worship of God has undergone a substantial Protestant change.
There's no dogma that's changed. There's zero dogmas that have changed.
What about unum sanctum?
In the deposit of faith.
Unum sanctum.
Wait, unum sanctum doesn't represent a dogmatic view.
What does that mean?
So he's
why is it in Denzinger? It's necessary for salvation.
Denzinger is not the deposit.
It's the collections of Catholic dogma, so it doesn't include what is the normative dogma. So how could you?
I think Tim's asking what unum sanctum is.
Unum sanctum.
Unum sanctum is the 1302 decree of Pope Boniface that to be saved, not only must you be in communion with the Roman Pope, you must also accept the Roman see's temporal supremacy, that he is quisauds haderach. The Roman bishop is the emperor of emperors. In fact, all the same terminology that's used in the first statement about this in Dictatus Papae in 1090 is repeated not only in Unum Sanctum, but also all the way into the 1800s into the Syllabus of Errors attached to Vatican I. So you're telling me that from the 1300s, from 1100 to 1300, all the way up to Vatican I and the Syllabus of Errors, all the rejection that they had of the proposition that the church and the state could be separate and that you don't have to believe in the temporal supremacy, that wasn't dogma, even though it was necessary for salvation.
Yeah. So what I would say to this is that the contradictions which inhere in the heart of Orthodox Christianity, Tim,
Two quick questions.
are fundamental, and they're literally.
Are you going to address what I call it, or is that just too?
No. This is really important because the so-called tensions, contradictions, developments in things like two swords theory are not at the heart of what's considered doctrine. There's reformable doctrine and irreformable doctrine. And what I'm raising
doctrine. What about Morari Voss?
Because we're looking at people that are Protestant. We're talking to Orthodox. The most important thing for the listeners out there is if there's a head of the church, then if there's a meaningful head of the church, then Roman Catholicism is true. And so we have to start at the beginning.
Equivocation.
Literally, it's not equivocation. This is as direct as we can be. If there's a head, and we should be
Antioch
specific.
the head of the church?
Let's be specific to the actual councils about which we agree, and that this is what Jay is going to be trying to avoid today, is that the 7 councils that they accept defines what the Pope is and the specific kind of headship, the visible sign of unity on earth that they are. I'll read some to you in a second from Ephesus, from Nicaea 2, from Constantinople 3, 4. If there's a Pope that is a meaningful boss that is appealed to with a kind of appellate supreme jurisdiction, then Roman Catholicism has to be true because it's the only one of the 3 sects that represents this. So listen to what was said at Ephesus, signed onto by the Orthodox. Holy and blessed Peter, the prince and head of the apostles, the column of faith, the foundation of the Catholic Church, the prince of the apostles, received the keys of the kingdom from our Lord Jesus Christ, and that to him was given the power of binding and loosing sins, who until this day and forever lives and judges in his successors. Now, what happened leading to the Third Ecumenical Council, Ephesus, is you have this guy Nestorius that's teaching falsely, he's the Patriarch of Constantinople, that Mary was mother to human Jesus, but not God Jesus, dividing his natures. Lots of Protestants today say this. Neither Orthodox nor Catholic.
I'm glad you clarified lots of
dividing
Protestants
his
and not
person.
Protestants.
Half or so. Lots of evangelicals.
Dividing his person, not the natures. Natures are divided, dividing the person.
Right, sorry. Yeah, dividing his person, not the natures. So Cyril of Alexandria writes the Pope, writes the boss of the churches. Or early on, this is the exact view of the papacy that the Roman Catholic Church has now. It's a collegial first, but the Orthodox are going to hit you with this idea that the Pope was merely the first among equals. This is one of those nonsense terms that would mean like a round table where he's not actually appealed to. He doesn't have a kind of appellate jurisdiction. He would not be able to excommunicate any of the other patriarchs. And so they write to him, and Cyril says to the Pope, we rely on the authority of the blessed Apostle Peter, on whom the church was founded, and whose successor the blessed Celestine, who was Pope at the time, is. He also says, Your Holiness, who holds the place of Peter, the Prince of the Apostles, has rightly judged this matter and condemned Nestorius. Now, what Jay and the Orthodox have to say is that it's a merely honorary position, but he could fire people. Well, like you would tell Dwight.
Can I address that? After?
I just want to cut in. I mean, I think the term prince here is very important because a prince is not an emperor. A prince is not a king. A prince is first citizen. Princeps. That's what the word meant.
Prince has prerogative. Prerogative goes with
sure, but what the Orthodox
they're appealing to his prerogative.
But what the Orthodox position is, and what the Protestant position is historically, is that the Pope has primacy. He is first among equals. That does not mean that he gets to unilaterally make decisions in the objection to the other pope.
Well, that runs foul of Ephesus. I'll read you Nicaea 2 after Jay says something.
So
I'll read you what Nicaea 2
to answer
says.
his claim from Ephesus and the idea of an appellate jurisdiction. Everyone is well aware of this. In fact, the Vatican itself has a great commentary on the meaning of this appellate structure in the recent document from Chieti, which is a Vatican-approved document on exactly what was
not authoritative, though.
It's an approved document. So this is what Rome nowadays says. Tim doesn't like what Rome says nowadays, but this is what
not dogmatic.
This is what it doesn't matter because this is what Rome says nowadays.
It's not a church document.
It's dogmatic when it's convenient for it to be dogmatic.
Your quote mine isn't dogmatic either. So allow me to.
It is
just real quick. This is one of the most esoteric debates ever.
It's going to be.
There are even Christians of each denomination being like, "What are they talking about?"
So what Rome nowadays says about this is that Sardica was received at the Council of Trullo. The canons of Sardica determine that a bishop who has been condemned can appeal to the Bishop of Rome, and that the latter, if he likes it or deems it appropriate, can order a retrial. Notice it is not a unilateral statement very contrary to the reading that you gave of it. He can order a retrial to be conducted by the bishops in the province neighboring that bishop. It is not Rome unilaterally deciding it. Totally contrary to the reading that he gave of it. And then it says, such appeals, it doesn't matter. Such appeals to major sees were always treated in a synodal way. Appeals to the Bishop of Rome from the East expressed the communion of the church, but Rome did not exercise canonical jurisdiction over the churches of the East. So when Athanasius gets appeals to excommunicate people, does that make Athanasius the head of the church? Of course not.
Not a church dog,
it doesn't matter because it's Rome's present statement on what your church's tradition is.
These are in the AAS.
So this is what happens. Pick and choose the documents that you don't like. So this is Rome. So Tim
documents have an ordering
more than the Roman theologians now, because Rome actually says what I'm saying about appellate jurisdiction.
We understand there's a difference of opinion.
There's a retrial. Can you name a single scholar that talks about this that doesn't have the Chieti view?
Oh yeah. All of the scholars who aren't with communion,
all of them.
Or
name one.
Yeah.
That is not one.
Let me name one.
Let me see. Say Nicaea too. Scholars aren't the mind of the church, by the way.
Really?
I'm talking about dogma. What hasn't changed.
You mean like the three dogmas I listed?
Dogma,
that you didn't address?
Nicaea
the ones
too.
that the contradictions you didn't address.
Those weren't dogmas.
Really?
Nicaea too.
So
dogma's on the Christos.
Got a book of dogmas in there.
Unum sanctum, all the way up until syllabus of errors, is necessary for salvation, and it's not dogma.
But we're talking about the first 7 councils. Let's get to
you're talking
sanctum
about that. I'm talking about
the reason I'm talking about it is because
if the first
most
7 councils
fundamental
disagree,
if
the first 7 councils disagree with the current position of the church,
they don't.
Exactly.
But see, the trick is this.
So what we have is
all you've done is quote my papacy. All you've done is quote my papacy.
You have 39,000 sects. There are over 39,000 sects.
Okay, no, we don't.
There are 14 autocephalous
completely made up.
churches. There are 14 autocephalous churches. So the tension resides in for Orthodox.
You know where autocephalous comes
14.
from? Do you know where it comes from?
Yes, I do.
Where?
But
where?
So
What
autocephalous churches,
what
they
council?
are relatively unified with
my
respect
church
to themselves.
Predates all of this.
When you have a visible
go back to the
sign
first
of unity,
century.
when you have one Holy Roman Catholic Church, the 4 marks of the church, this comes from Nicaea 1. When you have one, there's, of course, this is what they're playing on. It's a strong rhetorical position. Naturally, there's going to be lots of disparity within the religion, and so documents have to be ordered hierarchically. What's called the depositum fidei, what never changes in the church, best represented in real time by something called the Acta Apostolica Sedis, is something that is airtight. And there are tons and tons of liberal scholars since Vatican II, since Vatican I, that present opinions that they light on. Francis is probably the worst pope we've ever had, that do not make it into the Acta Apostolica Sedis and certainly don't make it into the Deposit of Faith. I thought we'd come here and talk about the first 7 councils because it's that which we agree about. At Nicaea too, let me just get this out. It says this: if you think that I was quote mining Ephesus, Jay, primatial authority everywhere on earth was given by the Redeemer of the world himself, Jesus, to the blessed Apostle Peter. Through the same apostle, the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Roman Church has held till now and will hold for all time primacy and sovereign authority. So you have the lineage there. It's for all time. It's primacy. It's sovereign authority. If there's a head of the church that can fire other guys, then this is the kind of pope that the Roman Catholic Church describes as the Bishop of Rome.
I have a huge objection to this. First of all, Pope Vigilius at the Fifth Ecumenical Council in the Acts of Constantinople II, the council decrees that he be excommunicated and removed from the diptychs. Vigilius submitted to the council. Does that sound like a autocratic position, or does it sound like the council's above the Pope?
It's collegial. No, it's not. No, the Pope is collegial. This is exactly what Vatican I says.
Vatican I says that
the Pope has a collegial relationship to the rest of the bishops.
But does it say that he relies on the church to do that?
No.
Or can he act
Vigilius I
autocratically?
submitted to the Pope, same as,
Vigilius
if we even
submitted
get
to the
into
Pope? Vigilius was the Pope.
People aren't going to follow this, but
Vigilius
so the
submitted to the council, not the Pope.
Yeah.
Vigilius was excommunicated by the council,
right?
According to Richard Price's.
The Pope submitted to the council. He said, "Yeah,
that's completely.
Would the Pope
that is not Vatican I view.
Would the Pope submitting to the council not prove that the council as a whole
not at all. No.
has authority over the Pope?
It proves that the Pope bears a collegial relationship. Listen
Vatican I says that the council's not above a Pope. You know that.
So of course,
so
it's not above a Pope.
Then why is Vigilius submitting?
Because everyone else, Protestants and Orthodox, misunderstand what the Pope's primacy is.
That seems quite convenient to the Catholic argument.
Exactly.
Well, it is. It's highly inconvenient to the Catholic argument that you misunderstand it. The Pope's relationship to all of the other churches is specifically this: he is, to the bishops is this. He's collegial. He has this ex cathedra power to declare infallible truth when and only when he makes the claim. And most of the time, the only 2 times we know that he's used the power in the last 1,000 years, everyone misunderstands it. What he did first in 1854 and then in 1950 is he polled all the bishops of the world to make sure that this ex cathedra power, which is not oracular, he's not divining out of his head magical truths that have never been taught. The Pope, because the Roman Catholic Church is the one church that goes all the way back to Scripture, the Pope wants to make sure that bishops always and everywhere have taught the Immaculate
How does this
Conception.
answer the objection?
Have
This is
taught.
filibuster.
Also,
Have taught.
how does
I'm
your
making
church
my own
alone
point.
go back to Scripture?
Do you see the distinction, though, Tim?
Well, so
when
I'll-
the Pope says, "I'm going to say something ex cathedra," and everyone goes apeshit,
This is not. This
they
is a
think
deflection.
that he's divining out
This
of
is a
his head.
deflection.
When
Not a
he's
deflection
when
at
he's in
all.
his special
Atticus.
chair, he's
That
infallible.
the Pope has a collegial relationship to the bishops.
Okay, wait,
but
hold on.
He's,
I got
he's their
questions.
boss.
I got
He can
questions.
excommunicate
Then he
them.
can't
Right,
be
right.
he can't be fired if he's their boss,
Okay,
and
I got
that's
a question.
exactly what happens with Vigilius.
It's more like the board of a
let me-
company
let me-
firing the
Vatican
CEO.
I says
me-
that the Pope is not superior to a council. He doesn't submit to the council.
Okay, let me ask. Okay,
didn't
you
submit
said
to
it. You said it. Okay, I got a question. I'm not a Catholic. I got no idea what half the stuff you're saying. All these Latin things and everything. You said the Pope can decree infallible truth. Am I wrong? Is that what you said?
Yes, ex
when he
cathedra.
speaks from his special chair.
From pastor. That's
So
right.
if he's
Yeah,
if he's
Vatican
in
one.
his is it actually a special chair or like what is it?
Ex cathedra means from the chair.
Yeah.
So from the chair, he can declare something to be true. Like if he said like gay marriage is never a thing. Is that an example of what he might say?
Yeah, and
He
it's
could
only-
also
it's
say
only
the
happened
opposite, and
twice.
he would have to respect it.
Of course. Right, and here's the proof.
So wait, he could
that
say
something ex cathedra has never been declared that wasn't held from all time. The beginning of the church, which is what happened. I didn't really get it out. But when the Pope has made ex cathedra claims, there are things that he pulled the bishops on first to prove that Vatican I was not a new Lone Ranger view of the Pope. He's not an autocrat. It's just a quick way of safeguarding
Right,
something
so-
that was always taught. The bishops
right,
say,
so
yeah, this
With
is
Veritatis
okay,
Papae,
so-
he
so
did
just
claim to be
real
an
quick,
autocrat.
to
He fully
clarify.
claimed that.
To clarify, my point, he is not deciding that he wants gay marriage when he says it. He is sitting in the chair and saying what the church believes based on what the church believes. Is that your point?
Well, the church doesn't have gay marriage. Never has. Never will.
My point is, if the Pope went to a chair and said there is no gay marriage, it's not that he's deciding it. He's saying this is
Yes.
what the church has always held to be true.
Precisely. Yeah. That's what everyone misunderstands at Pastor Aeternus Vatican I. The most important thing
So then hold on real quick. Sorry. And then it would sound to me the issue of removing a pope would be if he was clearly stating things that were fallible untruths from the chair.
Well, the first question, yes, correct, is the notion of that authority, whether he actually possesses the Vatican I authority that Tim is reading back into the many examples that contradict his reading. For example, Pope Vigilius is literally excommunicated and suspended at the Fifth Ecumenical Council. That's from Richard Price, the famous Catholic scholar's translation of the Acts of the Council. And so the argument is not that the Pope has no relationship to the bishops. So he deflected and defeated a straw man. The argument is that at the time of the Fifth Ecumenical Council, the Pope submitted to and was excommunicated by the council. And then now at Vatican I, it says the literal opposite, that no council is above or can fire the Pope. So it's a complete contradiction. And it's not just Vigilius. Tim said in his opening statement that the church via the Roman See cannot defect. If it could, it would lose one of its constituent components. And yet, at the next ecumenical council, the Sixth Council, Pope Honorius famously is a heretic. He did defect. All he did was write one letter that contained heretical statements. And the church at that council said he is a heretic, he's defected. And then 3 subsequent councils after also reaffirmed that condemnation. So again, indefectibility, the notion of authority is all fluctuating and elastic depending upon what Tim needs to be the case at the time. And his only answer was a tu quoque, and he didn't address any of the things that I read.
Also,
It wasn't
I'd like
a tu
to-
quoque.
It was. You said,
I wanna build-
Orthodox
I wanna
have worse
build on what
problems.
he just
Orthodox
said.
have worse problems.
Absolutely
That's a tu
wasn't.
quoque.
I want to build on what he just said, too, because if Honorius had declared monothelitism ex cathedra to be the truth, what would you have to believe?
Well, the claim of the church is that the church is indefectible. This is Christ's promise.
No.
Honorius.
Roman See is indefectible.
the
Vatican I
church
says the
is
Roman See is indefectible.
Okay, the Roman See is indefectible insofar as this requires interpretation. What if you get an Honorius? What if you get
Correct.
Yeah. What if you get
that's
no?
precisely the
it's a
question?
it's a system.
So
that defeated-
theological
system defeater.
opinion, whether we're going to Suarez or Bellarmine or Francis Xavier, theological opinion can vary on this because what happens then? Obviously, we know the church has to be one. It's got to be holy. It's got to be Catholic. It's got to be apostolic. These
Or maybe it's
four
just not
marks
the
of
Roman church.
Why does it have to respect the Pope as
Maybe it's
some
not the
sort
Roman
of
church.
let me get it
ephemeral
out.
prince?
'Cause I don't want to talk to two barking dogs. So let me get it out. We have to make these things really clear first.
Judd Nelson's getting mad.
More of a bobcat, really.
Nicaea II, primatial authority everywhere. What does this mean to you, Tim, if you were to hear Constantinople III? Because if the claim is that I'm expanding upon the view, the Catholic view of what the Orthodox view of popes might have been in the first millennium, then just explain what this language means. That the church has never erred from the path of apostolic tradition, nor she's been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations, but from the beginning she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the princes of the apostles of Christ, and remains undefiled to the end, according to the divine promise of the Lord and Savior himself. Now, because there are bad popes in history, there are lots of them. We've had 267.
Heretics, not just bad. Heretics.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to differentiate between, which no one in this audience, 10%
I'm
at
not
most
gonna
will know,
allow you to have
between
the
material and formal heretics, right? Which is going to take another 5 minutes. I'm not going to get out what I want to say because I'm defending this position. Look at Constantinople IV. You can't have material heretics. You can't have formal heretics. Constantinople IV, what does this mean to you? This is the 879 version. It was originally convened in 869. That's the Catholic version. I'm reading from the Orthodox document. Listen to this. What do you do with this? For just as the apostolic throne, having received the keys of the kingdom of heaven from the first and great high priest, Jesus Christ, through the chief of the apostles, Peter, he has the authority of universal binding and loosing. Binding and loosing is the power to forgive sins, which Protestants don't have at all. Orthodox have it, but except this is an Orthodox document. This was an Orthodox council.
We hold this council, Tim.
Peter. That's my whole point.
We have this council.
This
we
is
don't
my point.
disagree with you
You
on
don't
that.
have bishops.
Yes,
So
we
I'm
do.
Talking to the guy in the room.
We do have bishops, and they go all the way back to Aristobulus
Peter,
of Britain.
What does this mean to you?
We have
Peter,
bishop,
and
we
the
have
popes
apostolic succession
as
in the
the
first
authority
century
of
AD.
universal binding and loosing. They say this is just a symbolic power. Jay and the
we don't
Orthodox
say that.
it's
No, we
merely
don't.
an honorific.
No, we don't.
It's merely first among equals.
Now, hold on.
If you're appealed to,
I think there's an
Did all
interesting-
12 apostles have the power to forgive sin?
of course. But
It's
only
fascinating.
one has what's called here in this particular council the power of universal binding and loosing, which is why you would appeal to a pope to excommunicate the second in charge of the church. You have to tell me how
And
that
that's
can
why
happen.
a council can excommunicate the pope.
So-
because the
council
council's
didn't
above the pope.
excommunicate them.
I just read you the
Pope is
acts.
above any
I read you the
individual
acts about
bishop.
Vigilius.
The bishops
acts
are above
of
the pope.
The acts of the council say Vigilius was excommunicated. Your translation of your people say he was.
I would like to hear from you guys. What about the arguments you've made or believe makes your denomination superior in the true sense of the word superior? Are you saying that it's because you're right, you're correct, or is there something about your belief that inherently better serves the people and God?
Just to be very clear, the Anglican Catholic position, and by extension the Methodist position, because Methodists are Anglicans, is that the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, all of them, they're not the superior one true church. They are a group of Christians in their genuine best effort attempting to follow Christ in the most proper way possible, using the 7 ecumenical councils, using the 7 sacraments. We are Catholic up until the end of the 11th century.
Why?
So-
What happened then?
We began to disagree with the Pope.
So a Pope
it's a
came
long
in-
process. The Reformation did not happen in
In the
1517.
11th century, a pope came in who was saying stuff that was like way wrong.
I would argue it started with Gregory VII, probably, with the Dictatus Papae and him coming out, and because of a literal political situation. This was not a theological issue. This was a political
I have a question for you. You're an Anglican, then do you agree with the branch theory?
Anglican Catholic. I don't
agree with the branch
Can
theory?
you elaborate on the branch theory?
It's the typical Anglican idea that the church is split amongst a bunch of different branches.
I think that would probably line
Do
up.
you think that any of the people who composed the documents and the canons at the 7 ecumenical councils believe that the church was divided amongst a bunch of different sects?
I don't. Well, I mean, it's
He's Orthodox now.
Could you name anybody that believed that about the nature of the church?
I don't know that I would agree that it was necessarily divided into several sects, and I don't know that my church would agree with that either. I think.
Well, don't you agree with the idea that Protestants are trying their best, and whether they're Methodist or whether they're Anglican doesn't really matter?
No, I would say that there are Protestant sects that are more
Is the
properly
church
Christian
divided
than
amongst
others.
those branches?
Today, yes.
Okay. Did anyone in those 7 councils have that idea about the nature of the church?
No, but I also don't think that
So your church is not in communion with those ideas of the 7.
my church is not in communion with the Anglican Communion. We're not Anglicans. We're Anglican Catholics. We hold ourselves.
I'm asking you about the first 1,000 years
Yes.
of Christianity.
Yes,
but you have a.
we are in agreement with all 7 ecumenical
No, you're
councils.
not, because you couldn't name anybody that had your ecclesiology at those.
I don't think we're having
a big
the same.
word.
I don't think we're having the same conversation.
Well, maybe you should get on this conversation and answer the question, because that's what we're doing here today.
The terminology you're using is confusing to me.
It's common.
Yeah,
It's
no,
natural. The ecclesiology that the people the first 1,000 years had.
Yeah.
Did any one of them have a branch theory, or that the church is divided amongst a bunch of groups?
Again, I don't think we're having the same conversation.
So you
I
can't
think
answer the
we
question.
got off base at a certain point here.
Does your ecclesiology have any basis in the first 1,000 years?
Yes, we trace all of our ecclesiology back to the first 1,000 years.
Name a church father or a council that has your branch theory view of the church.
I think branch
Because
theory
it
is
doesn't
where we're having a disagreement here. I've
Whatever
never
you
heard
wanna
that
call it.
term before.
It's a classic Anglican term for the nature of the church. That's how they justified their Reformation position. So tell me one church father or council that has that position about the church. It's a very simple question.
I off the top
So
of my
it's
head,
not
I can't.
so it's ahistorical. That's
Off the top of my head, I can't give you an answer to the
not
question.
any.
What Jay's asking him for people out there listening about ahistorical, when a Protestant claims that I'm with the church, I was with the church the same way that the Orthodox were until 1054. Set aside who excommunicated whom for a second. They might agree in abstracto, which is why I called it abstract Enlightenment rationalism. They might agree in abstracto with what was going on, with the Orthodox or with the Catholics. They're always going to favor the Orthodox because none of these groups like the Pope or the unity required by a papacy. But what Jay was asking here is, for it to be true Christianity, true Christianity in its truest sense, it's got to be one holy Catholic and apostolic. There's a problem for the one mark and the Catholic mark for Orthodox, but Orthodox are actually Christian insofar as they have the 7 sacraments, and all of their bishops can be traced back to one of the apostles. That's what he was asking about ecclesiology. So when they say, "Oh, I agree with this," but no Protestant has the 7 sacraments or a bishop.
We have the 7 sacraments and we have bishops.
I'm gonna get very reductive and simplify everything to a ridiculous degree and ask questions that maybe are just ridiculously rudimentary for the average Christian. Do you guys all like when it comes to Mosaic law, laws of Leviticus? Do you all follow those, or are they considered archaic? How does the Old Testament play a role in how you live your lives and what rules you follow?
We're under the new covenant.
So what does that mean? I just don't know. Like the New Testament, so the laws of Leviticus don't apply? Or?
Yeah, the laws of Leviticus are specifically made for a very specific period in Jewish history. And Jesus does not come to erase the law. He comes to fulfill the law. So his position in the hierarchy is not as somebody who washes things away. It's somebody who fulfills it. The law was basically a series of things that Jews had to do to stay in communion with God. Christ gives us a different set of rules. That doesn't mean we ignore everything, but it means we take his authority over the old law.
So does that mean that when it comes to all of the Old Testament's rules, are there some that remain based on Jesus said outright, these are still to remain and these are not to remain? Sure. How do you, and this is not a question, how do you know which, I don't imagine that Jesus addressed literally every single rule or law. How do you know which ones to follow?
Probably, well, one way we disagree with him is to a degree, not totally, but I mean, Orthodox and Catholics agree that there is an oral tradition that's passed down from the apostles. So you have what's the written text of the New Testament, which the early church didn't have a Bible. They had some documents, they had some letters, and they had tradition, and they had the church service. So everything was kind of done in a liturgical service way. You would be getting catechized orally, and then eventually the Bible gets collected in later centuries to be the canon. But so basically tradition and the Bible lets you know what things carry over and what don't. And that's one of the reasons why the councils have church law. So church law kind of helps interpret that.
So I have a question. I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, but how do you all view Hutterites? Is it the word?
Oh, you mean
Hutterites?
Anabaptists? Like, yeah.
Yeah. How do y'all view them? Are they
We would say
wrong?
they're heterodox, yeah.
They're outside of the.
Yeah.
And I think you guys would all agree. It's like another. It's
Like
a different
Amish,
denomination.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a kindergartner level, urban liberals argument for the Christians right now when I say this, but is it not one of the instructions of God to be fruitful and multiply?
Yes.
Sure.
So we're having a conversation over what is the superior denomination. Well, I just looked it up. I don't think Mormons count. No offense to Mormons, but I think for the purpose of this debate, Mormons are a different area, right?
Mormons are non-Trinitarian. They don't believe in the same God that we do.
Pentecostals have a 2.1 fertility rate, and Hutterites have 6 to 7 fertility rate.
Jeez.
After that, conservative Protestants 1.8, Catholics 1.9, Orthodox 1.9, Jehovah's Witness slightly less than 2, Protestants 1.5 to 1.6, liberal Protestants 1.5, and unaffiliated Christians 1.3 to 1.8. So the Pentecostals and Hutterites, according to just a cursory search, are the only actual groups that are being fruitful and multiplying. And that's, to be honest, only the Hutterites, the Amish, Anabaptists. Everybody else ain't having kids.
I think traditional Catholics are having kids.
Just a cursory search, it is around 1.92. I thought it was a little higher than that.
There's not much of a difference between our three sects.
Y'all ain't having kids.
Well, if you
Y'all
go,
are supposed to be
if you go
fruitful
to
and
the,
multiply.
if you
What are you
go
doing?
to the Tridentine Latin Mass, it's a very different group, and
I'm going to ask ChatGPT this.
You know, it's going to be above
They
replacement.
I do really quickly, while he's doing that, I want to come back because I
Multiply.
had an opportunity to sit down and think about the branch theory thing. Do you not have a Russian Orthodox, a Greek Orthodox, an Orthodox Church in America?
Those are not branches. It's not at all the same ecclesiology of Anglican branch theory.
Well, first of all, I would point out that branch theory is not dogmatic.
I was just looking for whatever was.
I know, but the Anglican position is that we were part of the one true Holy Apostolic Catholic Church, and then
now you're not.
and then that church,
What's dogma in your church? How do you determine it?
the same way that Catholics and Orthodox do.
No, that's very different.
But we don't have we no longer have a pope, but we
You're
do
a
have, we
Protestant,
have
so
councils of bishops.
So how do you determine the dogma?
We have councils of bishops.
Okay, but what's a dogma? Like, do you accept icons?
No. Well, yes, we were not iconoclasts.
Well, but is it a dogma or is it an opinion? Because
We hold the same position as the Roman Catholic Church.
No, you don't,
Yes.
because Orthodox and Roman Catholics excommunicate people that don't believe in imagery, and most Protestants historically have allowed it to be something that's an opinion. How do you offer it?
There is a lot of pious opinion in.
So is it a dogma or not? That's the question.
I'm not sure exactly with
Okay,
icons.
so,
I don't believe that.
so
we
a lot of the
I don't believe we
basics-
excommunicate people for thinking that
Right.
icons.
So
are
it's
bad.
not a dogma, and thus many of the basics are not actually settled in your
If
position.
it depends on if we're in again, I'm not as well versed on the specifics of the councils, but if it's in the first 7 councils, we're in the same. We're of the same opinion.
But the problem with your ecclesiology is that when there are no leaders, right? I mean,
We have bishops, we have archbishops. I don't know why we keep coming back.
bishops that can trace their lineage
Yes,
all the
we
way
do.
back to one.
We
of
can
the
trace
12
back
apostles.
to
That's not
Augustine
true.
of Britain, and we can trace back to
Literally,
Aristobulus.
Orthodox and Roman Catholics.
Our bishops trace back to the 1st century AD in Britain.
Okay, wait, that's a
If
broken.
you have a
lineage.
totally different,
According to your.
if you have a totally different,
No, it's not a broken lineage. The church remained in Britain even after the Saxons got there.
You're identifying as an Anglican Catholic today?
Yes.
Or you're identifying as a Methodist?
I'm identifying as a
Or as
Methodist
one
who
of
is inquiring into the Anglican Catholic Church
All
and
right,
is getting
so you
confirmed
got-
later this year.
I mean, this is part of the problem. No, that's
No,
good.
right now we're having a
that's a
historical
step in the
discussion.
right-
I
that is
am
the
a
direction.
historian, but we're having a conversation about history right now. So your church recognizes Aristobulus of Britain. Your church recognizes Aristobulus.
you're a
of
historian, but you didn't know about the branch theory, which is like the number one.
I'm not a religious historian. I'm a historian. I'm a medieval historian specifically. So when we're looking at this, Aristobulus is the earliest we can go back with the Anglican Catholic Church because of the
That just
union
is-
between the churches in Kent and
You're
the churches
assuming
in
your
Scotia.
ecclesiology.
No, I'm not.
You are.
No, that's fair. It's just you're not.
both
You're not
acknowledge
you're not a
this.
faithful
we don't.
representative of.
You
pro-
both
we
of your
don't.
churches acknowledge
No,
Aristobulus.
we don't. We don't acknowledge your ecclesiology. You understand that from the Orthodox perspective, it doesn't matter if you have a laying on of hands.
Is Augustine legitimate?
If you leave the faith of the church, none of that from the Orthodox perspective even matters.
We didn't leave the faith of the church. The Roman Catholic Church left us. That's our position.
I know your position. I'm saying from our position, our ecclesiology doesn't recognize your ecclesiology, nor does his. They think that Anglican orders are invalid via Leo XIII.
That's because that's what's convenient to their theology. It doesn't actually have any sort of basis
saying that
in reality.
neither of us recognizes your lineage, and I understand that you think that it's there, but that's why
it is there. We can trace it all the way back to
only on the basis of your ecclesiology and presupposing the Protestant lineage.
We have an ordination that goes back
on the basis of your ecclesiology.
Do you understand? People out there need to understand that there is such a thing as apostolic sacramental Christianity. The Roman Catholic Church has, Ratzinger wrote on this in 2004 and in the 90s as well. We acknowledge that you can call the Orthodox churches with a capital C. They have bishops. They go back to apostles. They have 7 sacraments represented, acknowledged by the church. They're valid sacraments. You wouldn't be licit for a Catholic to receive there, or vice versa. But there is a shared ecclesiology. What people don't understand and need to about Protestantism, Anglican Catholics are slightly different. They're an exception to the rule. But of all the sects of Protestantism, they don't share any ecclesiology with us. So they'll say, oh, this is a dogma. What's a dogma? This isn't something that traces back to the Acta Apostolica Sedis. It's not something that the bishops always and everywhere taught together as a church. So we have to just say this. It's not to be exclusive, but Protestantism is a lay bastardization of the religion. You guys believe in a Trinitarian, you have a Trinitarian baptism in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So it is technically Christian, but except beyond that, and baptism, even in Roman Catholicism, can be done by a layman, which is what makes it valid. But other than that, Protestantism is an abstract idea. Yeah, I like the idea of Jesus. Idea. I like this book that the Roman Catholic Church.
So it's not the same ecclesiology. Thank you.
No, you're talking about Protestantism. That is a big tent.
You're part of that domain.
Yes, but the Anglican Protestantism is very different from the Lutheran Protestantism, which is very different from the Reformed Protestantism.
Which was my original point, right? There's not actually any clear unity there. It's all over the place.
No Protestant is going to tell you that there is Protestant unity.
Thank you.
They're going to tell you
that disproves Protestantism.
No, it doesn't.
A Council of Nicaea.
You guys
must be
unity.
One, holy, Catholic, and apostolic.
That
Each of those 4 marks has a very specific.
That doesn't mean that we have to be in communion with one another. Obviously,
it means you have to have those marks.
One holy Catholic.
We do.
Apostolic.
We have bishops. We have the sacraments. We have the history.
Is Bishop T.D. Jakes a bishop? He claims to be one.
I don't know who T.D. Jakes is.
Oh, come on. Woman, thou art loose.
You,
he's the black. He's the black modalist preacher who says he's Bishop T.D. Jakes. Is he a bishop?
Then doesn't sound like he is.
Oh, okay. But you're a bishop. Your church has bishops.
My church has bishops.
Okay. And why is that?
Because they can trace their ordination back to Augustine.
Right,
what if
like
Augustine? What if?
87th time the question's been asked, and he's answered the exact same thing.
Because he's not. But he's not understanding the.
Well, you're not going to get.
You guys aren't asking a question that makes sense. Why do you have ordination? Because we do.
No,
okay. So I think there's an interesting view between the three of you and what a superior denomination would be. And it's largely about what you think to be true to the religion as opposed to what the religion does and what its adherents do. And that's fine. I'm not saying I don't want to diminish that because obviously that's extremely important to know the truth and you know the history of things. But from my perspective, I take a look at the adherents to the religion and what they're doing and whether they can actually follow what they're being told to do. And it largely feels like they mostly don't. I mean, again, like if I was going to go off the sheer numbers, I'm more convinced to be Amish than anything else right now.
The problem is Gandhi. Gandhi said the same thing. He said, if I ever met a perfect Christian, I would go be one. You don't. There's some validity to the proposition by our Lord himself that you judge a tree by its
I get my point. My point is this. So I looked up the fastest growing denominations. The Independent Network of Charismatic Christianity is the largest growth, apparently, followed by Pentecostal churches.
Good God.
Pentecostals have like between 3 to 5% growth.
You understand the inverse proportionalism at work there, though. It's that they're small, so they can grow really, really fast. If a town's got 100 people and it gets 2 new people, it just increased its population by 2%.
But there are like
Roman Catholic
Church also Pentecostals. It's terrifying.
Also, the way the debate is framed which is not bad, but superior begs the question of like what standard? Like what's the metric for judging what makes it superior?
I would argue the superior religion is the one that brings the most people to salvation.
Yeah.
Well, but maybe truth is first and foremost, I think, for most of us or all of us here.
Yeah.
Like that, because we assume that the true religion will bear the fruits that go along with what's true first and foremost. So just having numbers isn't necessarily an indicator of the true religion, because you can have a lot of people who convert to a false religion or who think that they're converting and it's really just like Santeria or something like that in South America. That's not authentic, right?
So to be fair, I want to make sure I get the numbers right. I just looked up Catholic to make the point about inverse. 3.9 million people in 2023 became Catholic, whereas Pentecostal was 56,000. So
yeah.
It's correct. And I'll look up the other sects as well, because likely the same thing for Orthodox. They're much larger, so the percentage-wise is going to be smaller. But I guess my ultimate concern is the initial point of the question of superior religion is, I think, as you put, who brings people to salvation. Obviously, the truth of the religion is going to matter, because, like you said, if they're practicing Santeria, then they're not going anywhere. But there's also the fact that, I mean, largely among all of your sects, people are not having kids at all. Or I should say they're having kids, but they're having not enough. So you can keep converting, but eventually there's no people. I mean, where does this ultimately go?
It's a fair metric in some political sense, but it's also soteriologically who goes to heaven or not. It's a bit of a crass metric. We should be having lots of kids, and obviously Roman Catholicism is marked as the only solidified version of Christianity on earth that stayed against contraception after the Anglican Lambeth conferences of 1910, 1920, 1930, where all the other sects of Christianity capitulated. But it's true, and it's fair enough for people to say, particularly after Vatican II and the liberalizing trends, popular trends among Catholics, almost as many Catholics contracept as Protestants or Orthodox. This isn't quite true. If you go to a Tridentine Latin Mass, you're going to see big families. But which Jay pointed out. But I do think that everyone should, each of the three of us here should have a segment to state some sort of answer to the posit, if that's cool. Like what's your case for why you are the best version of Christianity, best major sect?
I don't hold the position that we are. We just hold the position that you're not.
Well, okay. That's incredibly weak, and that's fine.
We have a lot of Menanites around here, and they rock. They're awesome. They have animals. They sell food. It's always like real food, no chemicals, no garbage. Mm-hmm. They got big families, and I looked it up. The moderate Mennonites. There's a shop not too far away, 20 minutes. We used to go to all the time. And they got ice cream and cheeses, and it's all this really great stuff. I love it. That seems pretty cool. You know, so like if I was trying to figure out
which one, yeah.
Well, my point is largely like looking at the world today and the state of things. They make a pretty good argument. Mm-hmm. You know, don't eat garbage, be with your family. Honor, like they tend to honor their families, their communities, their parents. They go to church. They maintain this. They have lots of kids. Yeah, I know they're small. Right, it's only a few million.
Can I address that? Because there's two points. It actually addressed the point I was trying to make to you earlier. So, like, if you go back to the early church, there was a group called the Arians, and the Arians believed that Jesus was a creature. Mm-hmm. But the Arians were also very into morality and pushing morals. So they were, at least outwardly speaking, moral, kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses, you could say. But Arians had apostolic succession. But they lost the church and the faith, even though they had the mechanical succession. Likewise, Christianity can't be identified as Hutterites or Amish because it's a historic religion. So it has to be tied to the historic succession, not just of the bishops, but the apostles that Jesus appointed in the gospel to hand down that authority and that rulership of the church. So when you look at the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh centuries, you don't see anything like Anglo-Catholicism. You don't see anything like Hutterites or Amish. You see people coming together, having councils with bishops, with the Eucharist, with monastics, with the episcopacy, with relics, with all the things that characterize Catholic Christianity and Orthodox identify as Orthodox.
To be fair, though, I would argue that in those time periods, people were more likely to live in practice and worship as the Hutterites do.
No. The church's liturgical worship that you see with icons and incense is literally out of the Old Testament worship that you mentioned earlier, like the Levitical laws. The church adopted all of those, many of those ceremonial things, like having the priest decked out the way he is, with having an altar. Typically speaking, Baptists don't believe in an altar for the purpose of the Eucharistic offering. Right. So Baptists believe in it being a purely symbolic remembrance ceremony. But the early church is doing the liturgy. They're doing the Mass or the divine liturgy from the earliest days.
Which are the marks of religion. Everything he just described as what early church Catholics did applies to Anglican Catholicism.
It doesn't.
Okay, it doesn't. I don't think he knows what Anglican Catholicism is.
You didn't know the basics of Anglican ecclesiology.
I was not aware of a non-dogmatic
a very well-known thing.
That is not dogmatic.
It's your common doctrine of ecclesiology. You didn't know it. You're not going to lecture me on Anglican.
We also don't hold to the 39 Articles as dogmatic.
Because there's not dogma, as we showed a minute ago.
The marks of natural religion, qua religion, are really important here, and they do set off a kind of rift where the Protestants are alone. They're a voice crying in the wilderness, and we have to acknowledge that, and that's what I tried to acknowledge at the very beginning. The basic marks of religion, even the pagan Greeks had some of these. You would say Buddhism doesn't, Protestantism doesn't, but even some of the polytheists religions do. They have things like smells and bells. Having an altar is something from even pagan Greek religion, but for sacramental Christians,
the Jews
had them. Right, sacramentals, sacrifice, blood sacrifice, which really from Judaism to Christianity became sacrament. Precepts. The daily things you have to do. What are the 5 precepts of Catholicism? A sacerdotal order. Or ritual, or what we call liturgy. These are things that are lacking in Protestantism. I'm not saying this to be rude or exclusive, but when you're dealing with what I actually say makes the Roman Catholic faith the superior form of Christianity, is at the First Ecumenical Council ever, which was Nicaea, where we defined the most important stuff about the Trinity. There were 4 marks of the church laid out that Christ promised us the church would never defect. It would be this way until the end of time. It would be one. So there can't be competing sects. There can be arguments within one sect, but there can't be actual different competing sects. Holy, this means sacraments. Catholic, this means worldwide. And of course, apostolic, this means that there has to be a direct line of every bishop in the world back to one of the apostles. We would say, with all due respect, Protestantism by and large lacks all 4. Now, we do not make the same claim. The church doesn't make the same claim about Orthodox Christianity. They have real bishops that the church acknowledges, and that means that they have all 7 sacraments. 7ness means complete. So there's a different conversation that needs to happen between Catholics. You heard it because we're arguing about the first 7 councils versus a kind of quasi-religious Protestant.
Well, once again, we acknowledge and hold the first 7 councils.
But you don't, as I showed from the 7th Ecumenical Council, you fundamentally reject the thing that council was about. You said it's adiaphora. They say you're excommunicated if you don't accept images. So you don't accept the 7th Council.
Let's do it in
name, in theory and in name.
What are you...
It is your
You just admitted your position. That was what you said a minute ago, dude.
If I said that we have
dogma, you don't know what these terms even mean.
If I said that we don't agree with the 7th Council, then I misspoke because of something.
No, you said that I asked you if it was dogma, meaning you're excommunicated if you don't believe in images, and you said no, we don't believe that. Then you don't believe the 7th Council because it does that. It's a simple point.
Because we don't excommunicate people for not...
Because you don't have ecclesiology, ecclesiology. But
listen...
I want to bring in another... We got another denomination who's got some words for you. Warpig with a super chat saying, Baptists don't pray to middlemen and call them saints, and we don't pay for our salvation by giving Rome our coin. Long live American independent Baptists. What say y'all?
That's got to be a joke.
Rock and roll, dude.
Yeah, that's
a troll account.
So in 1 Timothy 4, Paul says to Timothy, be good, Timothy, because you will save those around you. Okay, does that mean that Paul thinks Timothy is the savior? No. Timothy is participating by cooperating with God, helping and being a conduit of grace to those around him. In the same way, Mary and other saints are not God. They're conduits that pray for us and help us, exactly the way Paul's talking to Timothy.
If you've ever asked your buddy to pray for you, I'm going through something the saints thing is absolutely retarded. When Protestants spurg out about this, it's literally asking the saints in heaven to pray for us. They're closer to God. Is the church triumphant? Rather than the people that if I ask you to pray for me, you're still church militant. It's a closer prayer to God.
I'm just still confused on why icons are an issue.
Okay, wait. I don't want to. Let's just.
We have icons.
I have a question for you guys.
Dogma.
We have icons.
Okay,
we have icons. If a church did not, if a church refused
You're missing
to display
the point.
icons,
Okay.
they would not be recognized as a church.
All right, we I don't want to go in circles on that over and over and over again with everyone saying the same thing. So I got a question. Do each of you think you will meet each other in heaven or no?
Yes. My church does.
Well, I guess it's true if you think that, right? If it's more liberal, does that make it true?
It's not liberal. We are.
It's a liberal position.
It's not liberal.
Well,
Liberal in a different sense,
I
you doofus.
But you're saying no.
You're a Trinitarian. You're a Trinitarian.
right,
I'm a
Who
Trinitarian.
decides that that's
we
the?
have all the
okay,
same
right,
sacraments.
How do you know?
My apostolic succession goes
Okay,
back just as far as yours and yours.
That's the 15th
What is the
time.
All
point
you've
here?
done is
We get
assert
it.
your position.
So what
It's a
question
true
was?
position.
The question,
You haven't actually rejected.
I'm going to mute.
I've already showed you twice.
We got
why
to.
it's false.
I'm kidding. Don't actually.
You have said that.
Do you even understand the arguments I'm making?
Not TikTok.
Your argument seems to be.
Can you restate the argument?
Your argument seems to be that if somebody doesn't have icons in their house, they should be excommunicated.
No, I didn't. That is so dumb. That is
We are
not
not
at all what I said.
We are not iconoclasts.
Literally not what I said.
Do you think these two gentlemen will meet you in heaven?
We don't make personal judgments on people's destinies. All we know is that we believe that the Orthodox Church is the Ark. It is the mystical body of Christ. And so it's our duty to tell people to join it. We can't say what God will judge at the end of time and at the great.
But so let's put it this way: outside of them individually, you think it is less likely that people who don't follow your religion will find their way.
Less likely.
And then how do you guys view it, Catholics?
Highly similar, almost identical view. We do believe you have to be in communion with Rome. But there are exceptions like baptism by desire.
Does everyone agree that the Holy Land belongs to Rome?
Rome?
Depends on how you define Rome.
I
Big
think
parts of the Holy Land belong to
the Orthodox.
actually.
The Orthodox Church is the third largest landowner in Israel. So,
Oh wow! So
the
technically,
Jerusalem Patriarchate would probably be the best claimant. In fact, the last
I was half kidding. It was a joke from Seamus when over the Israel-Palestine debate.
Yeah,
the
belongs to Christians.
I mean, there was
mainly Orthodox.
at one time in the Middle Ages, it was a Byzantine. It was part of the Byzantine Empire. So it was at one point a Christian colony, so to speak.
Yeah,
This is There's a chat here I'm going to read. That's I guess somewhat insulting to me. This H. Brasi says this was always the problem with Tim hosting the debate. You know it's going to turn into something he brings up with no epistemic foundation. My view is kind of like, yeah, probably because I don't follow any of these religions, or I do believe in God. I guess theist is probably the best word, not deist. But if I can't be convinced, if you can't convince, if you find somebody like, yeah, they believe in God, it's like, okay, here's why we're correct. If it's esoteric and hard to understand and you can't easily explain why your religion is correct to someone like me, then how do you convert people?
But that's a Muslim argument. Muslims will say our religion's true because it's simpler. But then when you get into the religion, you realize, oh, actually, there's a million hadiths that you got to learn, and it's really complex.
But I'm saying, how do you convince someone who doesn't know about the ecumenical councils and all of that stuff? So I hear a lot of very esoteric terms that I'm like, unum sanctum. I don't know what that is.
Right.
But Jay's not. I'm not trying to be evangelical right now. Jay is not. None of us really are trying to be evangelical because when you bring everyone into a room, the Catholic and the Orthodox are going to be debating councils and specifically what the constitutions require. So it sounds boring and stupid, but it's actually important. The way anyone would evangelize, I guess, since you do have a more secular audience, is by saying Christianity is demonstrably true. Christianity is demonstrably sui generis. It's unlike.
But I'll pause and say I think it's probably like 85% Christian of different denominations that watch.
Okay, yeah. Well, fair enough. But then you have
very few atheists actually.
You have to ask which version of Christianity to the 85% that are already convinced correctly that Christianity is true. You have to say which of the competing sects Orthodoxy is, we would say, much, 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 much closer, have the four marks of the church and can trace the practice of the religion today all the way back to our Lord handing the keys to Blessed Peter. That's what we would say if we're kind of putting it in broad forward-facing terms, and that's precisely what
I see with recently with the new Pope. He's from Chicago, and a lot of Chicago jokes. But there was another cardinal who had made comments about supporting the LGBTQ community. I forgot. He was the guy from the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there was big concern over his views on overtly cultural political issues. And to me, I look at that and I'm like, how could there be truth in an ever-evolving political climate that tries to adhere to politics?
Well, that's the biggest problem with the Catholic Church historically, is it's very intertwined with politics. Always has been.
Personally, my opinion is that the Catholic Church is trying to maintain as large a base as possible. And so you end up with people like Francis, and I forgot the name of this guy, this Filipino guy who said all these gay websites, I mean literally gay websites, not insulting them,
Like
were
Vatican.va,
oh,
the gay website.
no, there's like Pink News, I think it was, and like LGBT Nation or whatever, were saying like, this is the good guy, he should be the Pope. Because he was saying things like it's time to recognize gay marriage or whatever, or like things like that, going beyond what Francis had said with blessings.
The Vaticanistas all said that this is what, between him and the Cardinal of Bologna and some of the other far left cardinals that were considered popable at the last conclave last month, this is specifically why they weren't selected, even though they're considered most papably, because we tried this with Francis, and it's true. I would never deny, as probably one of Francis's best known American lay critics, who is Catholic, the church is trying a bad approach to winning over converts since a little bit before Vatican II. And what they're actually finding now, and the boomers and the dinosaurs in the cardinalate are finding to their chagrin, is that they're really mad about it. Francis hated it. He said these people have psychological problems. They like to go to the Latin Mass. They like to go back to the Mass of the Ages. This
is what I see in the trends as well, that we're finding that Gen Z, younger Gen Z, not older Gen Z, are finding faith in Jesus Christ. That polling was non-denominational. It was just, they were saying it. So, the men are leaning more conservative. And then, I suppose it's a factor in that Catholicism is so big. And when the Pope when the Pope passed away and they were choosing the new Pope, it's the biggest story in the world. So I can understand it. It just feels like they're lying to people to try and build up membership numbers. That's what it feels like.
I agree.
You want to get into lies of the Roman Catholic Church? Like the donation of Constantine, for example.
And this is not
that time that his church told the world that Constantine gave them the entire Western Empire to be their domain.
To clarify, I'm not saying this of Catholics. I'm saying that the current leadership seem to be their political strategy of, we need more converts, so let's say what we have to say to get them to convert.
And my church is doing the opposite thing. We separated from the larger church because we felt that they were doing that.
Again, separating, as I said earlier, makes you not a part of that thing.
Sure. What were you going to say?
So the point that I raised earlier about the papacy.
All right, wait. Let's move on.
The papacy, we didn't separate. We believe they left us.
And we believe they left us.
That's why I did an internal critique, which you don't understand. But
no, you didn't make your argument was veiled in esoteric language.
We don't need to keep going.
You excommunicate iconoclasts.
Esoteric language, the basic terms.
Make your point on.
So the issue with unum sanctum, all the way up to the syllabus of errors in the 1800s, where you had to believe in the temporal power and supremacy of the Roman bishop to be saved. It was mandated all that time for those centuries to be necessary to be saved, which the Vatican no longer believes for salvific purposes. They might theoretically still believe it, who knows, but I think Vatican II contradicts that with the dechristianizing principles. But the point is that ever since the papal states, ever since the 11th century, especially with the Gregorian reforms, the papacy has united itself with and tied itself into politics at an intense level. And that's not all totally the fault of Rome or just power seeking. You had the collapse of the Roman Empire, which led to the vacuum that allowed the papacy to step in. But by the time that we get to Dictatus Papae, just a couple things that we have in this document, the Pope alone can use the imperial insignia. All princes in the world must kiss the Pope's feet. This is the only name in the world. He alone may depose all emperors. He alone may confirm all bishops. The Roman See has never erred and will never err unto the end of time. The Roman Church is founded by God alone. The Roman Church alone can call itself universal. It can alone depose or reinstate bishops. Now, already we've seen that from Dictatus Papae in the 11th century, that's a contradiction with the way the councils acted and operated in the first several centuries. So the Roman bishop becomes a geopolitical world power, particularly in the 11th century, comes to its nadir, you could say, a few centuries later, and it is still intimately tied up with geopolitics because the CIA had a huge alliance with the Vatican during the Cold War and at Vatican II on record, and many Catholic writers.
So explain Vatican II?
So this is the council in the 1960s that was called by John the 23rd originally to update, to make the Roman See and the Roman Church more amenable to the world. Aggiornamento was his terminology, to open the doors and to let the world into the church.
Would you agree with that assessment, or
No. So Vatican II was. I mean, it's true that it was
all
called
those
by.
statements are true.
It's true that it was called by John the 23rd. But what happened at the end of Vatican I in the 1870s is the Franco-Prussian War interrupted it. Vatican I is famous. If we look at both of the last two councils of the Roman Catholic Church, Vatican I and Vatican II, they're both vastly misunderstood. The reason Vatican I is vastly misunderstood is because the Franco-Prussian War interrupted it, literally in between the two goals of Vatican I, laying out the power of the Pope, clarifying the power of the Pope, as it had always been for 2,000 years, 1,800 years, and laying out the power of the bishops, because it is a collegial relationship that the Pope has to them, even though he is the Prince of the Apostles. It got interrupted and separated by the Franco-Prussian War. So Vatican II, so it ended up looking, by the way, like just the Pope's powers were laid out. The powers of the bishops were never adumbrated because of the sudden conclusion of that. It was never actually concluded until John the 23rd concluded it almost 100 years later, 85 years later, right before he said, okay, we need to have a Vatican II to get to what the power of the bishops are.
what was Vatican I?
Vatican I laid out definitively what the power of
was it like a meeting?
Pope was. Yeah,
It's an
all of these are
ecumenical
ecumenical
council, which means that it was a full council of the church called by an emperor.
Not in all
No
cases
emperor
by an
in all
emperor.
cases.
No. It was the first 7 were called by emperors. Some more were called by emperors. Council of Florence was, but an
legitimate ones were
ecumenical
called by
just
emperors.
means that ecumenical council just means that it's all the world, all the bishops of the world. Vatican I concludes suddenly, getting just to what the power of the Pope is, which gave it a lopsided look, our ecclesiology afterwards. Vatican II needed to be held to get to what the power of the bishops were. Once we started getting more liberal popes like John the 23rd and Paul VI, who are the two popes alive during Vatican II in the 1960s, they changed the agenda. Actually, it was Karl Rahner and Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who a lot of people think was a right-winger in the church. He was not. He and Rahner together changed the agenda from finishing what Vatican I was supposed to do, lay out the power of the bishops, to what he called aggiornamento, updating the church, doing essentially liberal things. Now, the documents themselves are not bad. The documents themselves are
You sure about that?
insinuative. Yeah.
Can I read some of the documents in
Well, yeah, once I get done, yeah.
Sure.
The documents themselves are insinuative of a more liberal position, and they were intentionally written in such a way that they would be that they could be weaponized later. Lots of the council fathers that were Rahnerites admitted this. Things like, what's our relationship to be with the Muslims? Jay made reference to this earlier. What's our relationship to be with the Hindus? And it sounded more liberal. Really what they were doing was quoting things from Pope Pius X, a very based older pope. They're quoting even from medieval popes who acknowledged things like, technically speaking, the Muslims are monotheists. Technically, they're one of the Western religions. Technically, they worship the one true God, but they worship the one true God in the false way. Trads,
rad trads, Orthodox, everyone gets worked up about this, but it turns out that this is a very, very old medieval term that the church had.
Is that the same for Hinduism? Because Vatican II says the same
It
about
says
Hinduism.
they believe. They
No,
believe.
it doesn't. Not about Hindus.
Yeah,
Hindus,
yeah,
not Muslims.
yeah, yeah.
Hindus.
Okay, read what it says about Hindus.
Thus, in Hinduism, people explore the divine mystery and
They explore it.
and express it. How do you explore the true mystery of God?
Explore. You can explore and
In a
not find
false
what you're
religion?
looking for.
No, you don't. You don't.
What are you saying?
You don't explore Christianity.
It's
in
an
Hinduism.
absolutely
You
false
don't explore
religion,
Christianity in Hinduism. They seek release from the trials of the present life through ascetic practices and meditation and recourse to God in confidence.
I agree.
and love.
All that's bad, but you missed the term.
So it's bad.
My Uncle
wait a minute.
Remus.
So
wait. My Uncle Remus believes he
your
can fly.
dogma-
Jay's like, your uncle can fly.
No, this is your dogmatic statements that are supposed to provide clarity.
Right.
They need to be
explore.
interpreted by you
So-
because they're ambiguous.
No.
Are they
this
clear
is
or ambiguous?
Perfectly clear.
They're
the Hindus
really. You just said it was bad.
explore the
You
divine
said it was
mystery.
bad.
Wait, but let
Is
me
it
say
clear or bad?
You finish, Jay. I'll go after you're done. They
They have
explore.
recourse to God. in
Trads will do
confidence
the
and
same
love.
thing.
So just again, what does that do?
We have
That's a
sedevacant
deflection, irrelevant. What's
No. That's a direct object.
That's a genetic
That's
fallacy.
a direct object on the
Genetic
other side of the
fallacy
verb.
to say that because
Not a
Satan's
genetic
make this
fallacy.
It is.
I'm a logic professor.
You just said I don't know. So appeal
Literally.
to yourself. Right?
No.
Appeal to authority. Appeal to authority. Genetic fallacy. Do
You
want to do
missed
another fallacy?
They believe.
You're a king of fallacies.
They
Mike.
explore.
For the
Okay.
record, we agree.
It
They
doesn't
believe.
say they believe.
They
You're
explore.
lying. You
It
added
says
that
they
to.
explore.
Where does it say they do that?
Read the
It
sentence.
says that they seek release and they have recourse to God in confidence and love.
They seek.
They have recourse.
seek.
No, and have recourse.
They seek.
And have recourse.
Okay. So
And
what he's
does
doing.
it say and recourse?
Finish up.
And recourse.
Finish up.
What does that mean, recourse?
They have they seek in God.
They can attain salvation.
Confidence and love in God.
I'll
in
speak once he's done. So what the
Hinduism-
Vatican II document said, I was very honest about
By the way,
this.
it's a genetic fallacy
Written
to say
in-
that.
Can I see the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Read the
This
sentences.
paragraph right here.
Because
Let me read it
Vatican
again.
II.
Let me read it again for you.
I was this close to getting the book.
in the religion,
just gonna keep
in the
reading.
religion of Hinduism, people explore the divine mystery.
Explore.
Thank you. I just said that.
This
Do you
doesn't
wanna
mean they
do you wanna
found it.
repeat each word after I say each word?
But have you said ascertained? If they said ascertained, we'd have a
Are you
hard
gonna
time.
so he doesn't want me to read the whole quote because he knows the later.
No.
The
Keep
later
going.
part is
And
what,
then let
is
me
what
talk.
he's saying.
The difference between
Hindu-
seeking
stop.
and finding
It-
is very real.
They have recourse to God in confidence and love.
No, they don't. Start the sentence over. They seek. Jay thinks that the sentence said that
This-
Hindus have
that's the first part
ascertained
of this.
the truth.
It says
they haven't
that-
ascertained it.
It
They're
says
seeking.
that through.
They're exploring it.
Now, but you said it was a bad statement earlier.
No. I said
No,
that.
it's not.
That's from.
Can I see it?
Read the document. I'm saying that it's very easy to misinterpret if I say my
When it
my
says-
dear old Uncle Remus
Why do we
believes
need?
that he can flap
Why
his
do we
arms
need
and
you to
fly.
interpret the document?
You're saying
read
that.
this.
Why do we need you to interpret the
I need
document?
you to
right.
interpret the
What?
document.
That's
let
like
me
too
read-
quick.
let me-
You're
let me read-
again. The logic professor keeps making fallacies
I got
over
you.
and
You
over.
asked me what
Let me read it.
I thought it
Why
meant.
do you need to
go
interpret
ahead.
them?
Let me read it. There's a paragraph before that one. I just want to read the full paragraph.
Good.
Or actually, this is part of the full paragraph. It says, throughout history to the present day, there is found among different peoples a certain awareness of a hidden power, which lies behind the course of nature and the events of human life. At times, there is present even a recognition of a supreme being, or still more of a father. This awareness and recognition results in a way of life that is imbued with a deep religious sense. The religions which are found in more advanced civilizations endeavor by way of well-defined concepts and exact language to answer these questions. Thus, in Hinduism, people explore the divine mystery and express it both in the limitless riches of myth and the accurately defined insights of philosophy. They seek release from the trials of the present life by ascetical practices, profound meditation, and recourse to God in confidence and love. Buddhism, in its various forms, testifies
to God
to
in
the
confidence and
essential
love.
inadequacy of this changing world. It proposes a way of life by which people can, with confidence and trust, attain a state of perfect liberation and reach supreme illumination either through their own efforts or with divine help. So, too, other religions which are found throughout the world attempt in different ways to overcome the restlessness of people's hearts by outlining a program of life covering doctrine, moral precepts, and sacred rites.
Yeah. This
Is there perfect liberation in Buddhism?
Now, real quick, I do want to read just a little bit. I did want to read the one paragraph. There's a little bit more that I think is interesting.
You already said it's bad.
It goes
Worded.
on.
You said it was badly worded.
Insinuative
It now answers
because
this.
people like
Then
you
it's
go ape shit.
so
It
people
now-
like
it
me,
now
right?
directly
So again,
answers
another
the
fallacy.
same-
Ad hominem.
So it actually
Five
says
fallacies,
here-
Tim. Good job.
It actually says here.
Do we have a mute button?
Immediately following?
Yeah, because he's calling out. I'm calling
Okay,
out the
guys.
logic professor's fallacies.
I just want to point out that by that. Okay.
Sorry to do it. But immediately following this paragraph, it says, The Catholic Church rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions.
There it is.
It has a high regard for the manner of life and conduct, the precepts and doctrines which, although differing in many ways from its own teaching, nevertheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women. Yet it proclaims and is in duty bound to proclaim without fail Christ, who is the way, the truth, and life. In him, in whom God reconciled all things to himself, people find the fullness of their religious life.
Thank you. I was going to ask for the
I don't
book
know
so
what
I
you
could
think.
read that.
All that shows
feel
is a
like-
contradiction.
No,
That doesn't help you out.
I actually agree with the Catholic view. It's basically saying the way I interpret that is to saying Hindus and Buddhists are looking through a keyhole and seeing these fragments that they're not quite understanding properly. And
Right.
if they were to adhere to Jesus Christ and find the way,
Precisely.
The
what
problem
it
is
says.
not-
and that's
the
precisely
problem-
what all
no,
the even
that's
non-liberals at the
false.
council
The problem
said it meant.
is that only
It's written by liberals.
John 14, Jesus says that he's the only way, right? The way,
course.
the truth, and the life.
it says that.
No, but
says
I
that.
understand that the problem is that you cannot. It says in the religions of Hinduism and in Buddhism, men find love in God, and they find.
No, they seek love.
No, it says they find it.
They believe they
one
seek it.
phrase says seek it, then it says they find it. Just like it says.
Read it again.
Just like it says Muslims adore the one God.
No,
Do
it says they-
is adoration.
Well,
Is adoration-
Muslims are different because they're
No, they're
Western
not.
religion.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are. Do they
What's a
believe
Western religion?
Do they believe in one God or multiple?
They believe in monotheism.
Vatican
don't
II
believe in
says the
Trinity.
Does
monotheist.
the Bible teach?
Of course, they don't
Does the
believe in
Bible teach the Trinity or monotheism?
the Trinity.
Oh,
But
so then Muslims don't believe in the God of the Bible.
do you know what the sense or reference
Wait,
dichotomy
I do
is?
know that, yeah.
Okay,
I do.
so
I have a question for you.
So if you understand what sense reference dichotomy
What
is,
is Jesus- okay,
we
so
can be referring to the
does Jesus
same
say-
thing.
does Jesus
you
say-
describe it as yellow, I
How
describe
about
it as
the
red,
Pharisees?
and we're still
Does
referring
Jesus
to the
say
same
that the
thing.
Pharisees
You're
worship-
misunderstanding the
Oh, so
sense
you
reference
won't-
dichotomy.
Does Jesus think that the Pharisees accurately worship the Father?
No, of course not.
So then that undoes your argument
But
about
no.
Muslims. It
Okay.
undoes your Muslim
Explain,
argument.
because you said you understand the sense reference dichotomy. Explain how by sense
Word concept
the answer
fallacy.
is affirmative, and by reference it would be a negative answer. We can be referring to the same thing. If you think Cleveland is
It doesn't
Cincinnati,
matter.
and I think
You want me
it's
to disprove your
Cincinnati,
sense referent argument?
and we're not that.
You want me to disprove your sense
Just
referent
answer the
argument?
question.
I can disprove it by
Sense
by
reference.
Mormons.
Sense reference.
Do Mormons believe in Jesus?
No, but Mormons don't believe
No.
he's the
Do
Son
they
of
use
God.
the term Jesus?
No.
They
Yes,
don't
they-
believe
Yeah,
that.
they do.
Mormons
They're
don't use the term
Mormons
Jesus?
absolutely use the
You're an
term
idiot.
Jesus. It's in
Mormons
their
use the
church
term
name.
Jesus.
Wait. No.
Do Mormons use the term
believe
Jesus?
Church of Jesus Christ of
yeah.
Latter-day
Mormons
Saints.
believe
Melt
Jesus
down.
is Well, I'm the one guy that hasn't been interrupting. So Mormons believe
serious?
that there was a historical Jesus. He believes that Mormons
Do
believe
they
that
use
Jesus
the
was
term
not
Jesus
the Son of God.
Christ? I know what they
of course,
believe.
Of
It's
course.
the name of their religion.
So just like Muslims, if they say I believe in the one God, it's the quantifier shift fallacy.
No, that's true.
It's the It's true.
But that's what the
Well, thank
document
you.
is
If it's the
representing.
quantifier shift fallacy, then that undoes what.
what does that mean? What does that mean?
So it's like if I say I have one mother, you have one mother. We all have one mother, therefore we come from the same mother. It's a quantifying shift fallacy. So one God, well, we all believe in one God, therefore it's the same God. Vatican II is using the quantifier shift fallacy.
Read the line. Read the line that you think is false definitively. Because there are no definitive statements you've read that are false.
Notice that
Seeking, searching, exploring.
Why do we need
My uncle
all of this? Why
believes
do
he
we-
can
whole lot
fly.
like bias
This
in
is
it to me.
retarded.
I
This is
think-
retarded.
so the quantifier shift fallacy is retarded.
I think. Okay, guys.
No.
Let me say this.
The claim that there's something false you just read is retarded.
Okay, let me.
It's written by liberals.
Okay.
I gave you that.
Wait
at the
a minute.
beginning.
It's written by liberals, but it's supposed to clarify. So the
have a
papacy
question.
does the job of clarifying,
I-
but it's written by liberals, and we need Tim to interpret it for
You
us.
don't need me to interpret anything.
what- you said
I'm
it's ambiguous.
defending
Hardest
against an
things are two
attack that
Tims.
you're making that's common.
Muslims
and
worship the
mischaractered.
one true God, living and subsisting in Himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Quantifier shift fallacy.
They don't
That's
say
a
it.
pretty tough one to get through.
Quantifier shift
I'm
fallacy.
dealing with two barking
It
dogs
says-
every
I see that.
time.
It says that-
Muslims
I'm barely
claim.
talking,
How about
man.
this? Muslims claim to believe in one God.
It doesn't say. It says they adore. It doesn't say they claim.
Muslims do
You're
adore
adding
one
the
God.
words.
Now,
they adore
by
the.
by the
It
sense
says
reference
the.
dichotomy.
He's right, it does
Muslims.
say the.
Okay, wait. Hold on. I'm gonna read this.
Tim.
I want to read this. I'm gonna read this.
Yeah, read it.
This is important. It says the church also has a high regard for the Muslims. They worship God who is one, living and consistent, merciful, and
Precisely.
What do I say?
Wait,
Precisely.
I'm not
That's
done.
what I said.
I'm not done.
Let him finish
I'm not-
reading.
I'm
You're
not done.
being dishonest.
I'm not done. The creator of heaven and earth, who was also spoken to humanity, they endeavor to submit themselves without reserve to the hidden decrees of God, just as Abraham submitted himself to God's plan.
Just like Abraham.
And whose faith Muslims eagerly link to their own. Although not acknowledging him as God, they venerate Jesus as a prophet. His virgin mother they also honor. and even at times devoutly invoke. Further, they await the day of judgment and the reward of God following the resurrection of the dead. For this reason, they highly esteem an upright life and worship God, especially by way of prayer, alms, deeds, and fasting. It does seem like they're saying, as far as I can tell, Muslims are worshiping the same God.
Yes.
Well, yes,
Which
this is a
objectively
community college primer on intro to religions and nothing
You mean how
more.
you couldn't get quantifier shit
Islam,
fallacy?
It's in your
Islam is literally one of the 3 monotheisms in Western religion. Is it triune? No. So by
Oh, it's
sense,
not the God of the Bible,
hold on.
according to you.
By
You said the Bible God is the Trinity.
no.
Yes, you did.
Well, of course. You don't think I think the Bible God is the Trinity?
Then the Muslims don't worship the same God because of the quantifier shift fallacy.
The Muslims don't worship the same God. It
book
doesn't
says
say
they
the
do.
same God as us.
The book
Thank
says
you.
they do.
Thank you.
No, it
Thank
doesn't.
you.
Can
He
you
just
read
said
it against him? They don't worship the same God.
Muslim. Are you serious?
What's going on here? How are
He
we
just
having
agreed.
this discussion?
They worship God who is living and subsisting in himself.
Same. We're
the
same.
merciful, almighty creator.
No, you said the same God as us. As us.
It
as
is
you and
saying
I.
us.
No, it doesn't say us.
Oh, so it doesn't say us. Are you serious?
Dude, Muslims
Sophistry?
worship. How
This
many
is why we left.
gods do Muslims
This is why
worship,
we
Jay?
left.
Doesn't
Jay,
say.
Jay Dyer, how many gods do Muslims worship?
worship-
Most
read this
How many
again.
do they
we've ever
worship?
had.
By the way,
1 or 2 or 3?
I don't believe in generic monotheism. That's a word
Well,
that
that's
exists
a distinction.
in the 1600s.
I also don't agree. I believe
Tim,
what you're
it's the
saying.
quantifier shift fallacy.
One thing for certain is
fine.
the Muslims.
Can you tell me how
You
it's
don't
not?
believe that they believe they worship one
It
God.
doesn't matter because the statement is that
You said
they
you
do.
understood the sense
They
reference
do
dichotomy.
worship
They do worship.
the one true God, Tim.
So what you're quibbling
you're
over
failing.
is whether or not
You're melting
the
down.
verb and the
Hey,
direct
hey, can I
object
see
there
it?
We don't need a
are
grammar
in
lesson.
agreement.
We don't need a grammar lesson. Literally,
You do need a grammar lesson.
No,
you
I-
do.
okay, let me-
You're a
okay,
logic
okay.
professor. You couldn't do the quantifier shift fallacy.
hold
This
on.
guy doesn't know that Islam claims to worship one God.
It doesn't say they
Okay,
just
okay,
claim
okay.
it. It says they do.
It
Tim.
says they worship God, not they worship
you.
a God.
Well, the church, the Roman Catholic Church, has always acknowledged
This is the Roman Catholic Church.
since Pius X, since 2 different medieval popes, that Muslims
That's why it's a contradiction.
worship in some
That's
sense
why
the
it's a
same God,
contradiction.
different reference.
Tim, no.
Simple
Grammatically,
fact.
grammatically, this is very straightforward. They worship God, not a God. They worship God.
And even the
capital
one true
G,
God. The
who
church
is
taught in the
one-
medieval
don't,
church.
Tim.
They
one true
worship God, who is one living and subsistent,
Could you
merciful and
read-
almighty.
I'm not quibbling with the
creator of heaven
Protestant and
earth,
Orthodox.
who has
I'm just
also
saying what the
spoken
church
to
has always
humanity.
taught.
That is them saying
Can
they
you
worship
address-
our God.
Could you address the argument then?
Well,
how does
guys,
the quantifier
The argument
shift-
is
would
the
be-
church
you would be
never
right if it
changed
said
its
a
teaching
God.
on Islam.
Tim, you would be right if
That's
it said
the
a
argument.
God.
The argument is what?
I can read you from the personal Pius X catechism that
I
they
know.
says the one true God. You
Tim,
might have
it's
issue
wrong.
with
Wait,
that.
okay,
It's
let's
wrong.
pause real
Not
quick,
wrong.
real quick.
I-
It doesn't
I'm just-
represent a
I'm
change.
arguing
guys,
that
guys,
it's
okay,
wrong.
okay, guys,
Fair.
real quick.
But it doesn't represent a
just-
change.
Okay, we're not.
It doesn't represent
okay,
a change.
Okay, guys, we're
What
not.
about praying in
the
March?
conversation is not advancing.
Can I ask one question?
This conversation hasn't
I wanna
advanced in
say one
1,000
thing.
years.
It's not. I think it's actually been pretty good actually. What I interpret from that is that they were trying to say there is one true God, and even in that regard, they're saying other religions are seeing it improperly and doing it wrong. Like the argument is you look through a keyhole.
Right.
I think that's what it's saying. It's saying
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying.
Muslims are looking through a hole and they're seeing something tiny and they're not doing it right.
Right.
Hindus are looking through a different hole. So I think the argument of Vatican II is there is only one true God. Everyone else is just looking at it wrong.
The
Right.
problem-
Written by Jesuits.
also
who are
said-
very liberal.
So see now,
they're
it's bad
insinuating
again. Now
that.
it's
Their
bad
church
again.
created the Jesuits, by
Now
the
it's
way.
bad again.
That was on them.
So from the Orthodox perspective,
Yes, the Jesuits are Catholic.
From the Orthodox perspective,
Newsflash.
You just
Protestant
complained
says
about the
Jesuits are
Jesuits.
Catholic.
From the
You
Orthodox,
just complained about them and said they're too liberal.
Yes, that's a
What's-
well-known
what's-
Catholic
what is it,
position.
So
Episcopalian?
Catholics can be too liberal and it's
Is
fine.
it the
Protestants, though.
Episcopal Church where they have
yeah,
like,
they have an
gay women?
ecclesiology still.
Yes, sir.
We also have
Guys,
ecclesiology.
No,
But I got a question.
We're
because
not
I
going-
say
we're not
that
going
the
back to that.
Jesuits
They're just
trend
objectively
liberal, it
incorrect.
doesn't
Okay,
mean
guys,
that they're
guys.
Protestants
Can-
like you.
Well, you also expelled them
okay,
because they
okay.
were too liberal.
Okay,
So.
is the one
for
thing
less
y'all
than
can
20
agree
years.
on is that the Episcopal Church is the inferior church?
The Episcopal Church sucks.
Do you all agree?
yeah, we
Yeah.
agree with that for sure.
Sure.
So I want to highlight too that I think Tim will have to admit this, that post Vatican II, we can see the actions of the papacy, how they interpret this document, because they in many cases literally will go pray in mosque towards Mecca. Benedict XVI did it. Also, John Paul II did it. Benedict XVI and Francis both did this, where they went to the mosque, they reverently prayed towards Mecca. That's an outward expression of the interior disposition in Roman Catholic moral theology of their faith.
No, that's
so the
bad.
way that
It's
they
bad. It's not dogmatic. That's
Vatican II is not dogmatic?
no. Vatican II is dogmatic. The Pope's going and praying.
I'm
somewhere
saying
stupid,
that it expresses
like
their
a mob.
action. It expresses their faith. That's
As the
all I'm
Patriarch
saying.
of Constantinople,
I think
made
I
plans
think he's
to
a
do
heretic.
this?
I don't have a problem saying he's a heretic.
Okay,
But you can't say that. You can't say the Pope's a heretic.
Francis was a material heretic. We don't know yet if he's a formal
No
heretic.
one judges the first see? Do you?
No one has judged the first see yet.
Who
But
can?
You're judging it. Now,
the Cardinals could.
Canon 7.
Oh,
Cardinal.
wait,
hold on.
wait,
Canon,
so-
Canon 750 says that laity do not have the right to judge the bishops and the sees.
I'm not judging him. That means
You just said
to
he's a
lay
material
decree on
heretic.
them. A material heretic
He's not
and a formal
formally
heretic.
judging him.
I know what it means.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
formally
You don't have authority, but it also means that you don't. It says that you have to submit with docility to the rulings of the ordinary teaching.
Of course. That's not
Then
a
you don't
teaching.
get to
That's
say-
an action.
Then
We
you
can
don't get
say
to
that
say
this is in conformity
this is
with
sophistry.
the liberal view,
let me just-
with the liberal
Then you don't get to
misinterpretation.
judge the first
All right.
see.
You can't just talk
I'm gonna-
over
all right,
everything.
I'm- let me
Did the
throw
council
something
judge
in there.
The
vigilance?
intentional liberal misinterpretation of those passages you read, which
So
I think
Vatican-
Tim interpreted.
so the
wait,
papacy
which
doesn't
Tim
clear anything
interpreted
up.
correctly.
So
I'm
the-
gonna-
can be
say this.
taken by popes and made mince of.
I'll just say this real quick. That which I read is more convincing to me of the Catholics.
well,
I would agree if not
you-
for the fact that it says Muslims worship the same God as
Correct.
us.
I
It
think
doesn't
that- I
say
think
same
it
God.
does.
He
But-
checked
but-
it.
No, hold on.
Jay, does it
it
say
says
same?
the same. Yes,
It doesn't
it does.
say the word same.
It doesn't,
Okay, but hold on, hold on.
It doesn't
Says
literally
the one
say
God.
the same,
Okay,
but
guys,
it does
guys,
grammatically say
Just
the
making
same.
shit up.
Who's the creator, Tim?
Wait.
Who's the creator?
I
Does
think
it say
correct.
same?
It
Who's
says
the creator?
God. It says they
I-
worship
we'll check
God.
it.
Capital
Who's
G,
the creator?
People out there,
pronoun God.
does this passage?
Who is
don't
the
just yell into
creator?
the microphone if no one else is, if people keep talking. I think it's correct.
Okay, but who's
I think Muslims do worship God.
They don't.
they don't. But
Not our
do.
God.
So he already admitted.
And so
But that says capital G God.
that's why this is convincing to me, and you guys aren't being convincing to me.
But
I'll tell you why.
Again,
Can
if
I
it said
explain why
a
they
God,
don't?
if it said a God, I'd agree with you. But it says
Because
God,
I think-
a formal
Believe
title.
there's a God besides God?
I think there is one
That's
God.
the sense reference dichotomy right there.
No.
So
you believe there's another God besides God?
so the popes pray in
you just said you believe they
You
worship
actually
guys,
hear
guys.
what I said.
Okay,
said
hold
a
on.
God.
We
I
can't
said
just-
if it said they worship a God, as
This is
in
important.
they believe they're worshiping a God who is similar to
No,
our
not
God.
they believe. They really do. Remember, that's the
Tim,
key. Wait.
his
We're talking
argument.
about your text, dude.
It's your text.
You literally. I know it's my text. You literally
I agree
said
with that.
what would make all the difference is if they said that the Muslims worship a God rather than a God. You're making reference to the sense reference
No,
dichotomy
he's
by
correct.
saying a.
No.
it's not
That's
right.
why you couldn't answer the
Because
qualifier
they
ship
can't-
fallacy.
no,
No,
They
you're,
can't-
you're,
they can't
you're
worship a
either not
non-existent
understanding
God.
what I said or
You're not
deliberately
understanding his
misrepresenting
argument.
what I said.
I'm not deliberately misrepresenting anything. I'm saying
Then
that
you don't understand what I said.
the sense reference dichotomy literally covers whether
the
or
word
not
concept
they say
fallacy.
God
We
or
don't need to go
a
to sense
God.
reference dichotomy. This is grammar.
Well, do
Okay,
you know what it is?
Yes. Okay, guys.
This
okay.
is grammar.
It's a
Tim Pool
grammatical
understands it.
distinction.
Tim understands it's the same God.
He is not
But
not
it
saying
doesn't
it simply
say
because
same.
they
It does. It
It
says
says they
creator.
worship God, capital G God.
I'm going to quote my friend Jay Dyer, who says that this passage says same God, not one God.
Who's the creator, Tim?
Same God would be
Tim, who's the creator?
the same God would be an
So you can't answer
indexical.
this.
So,
Why are you being dishonest?
so you're being dishonest. You
Who's
said
the
it's
No,
creator?
you're Tim. You're,
literally.
Come on, man.
same.
Come
People
on.
out there.
Who
check
is
it.
the
Come on.
creator?
This is
Because
such
he
cope.
can't answer.
Look, I understand
Notice
you
how
don't
he's
understand
coping.
the philosophy
He's
involved.
melting down and coping because he can't answer who the
Melting down
creator
at all.
is.
You made up
This
that
guy
it
called me a
said
heretic 20 minutes ago, and I agree with him.
Muslims worship the same God as us would be by an indexical.
I'm a
Same
Unitarian
means
now.
that it says. If
Tim,
we use the word same, it would.
Do you want the attributes?
It would be heresy, and
It's
that's why I said it wasn't
Tim, it's
in there.
natural theology.
If it says that
It's
they
your
worship
natural
one
theology.
God, then it would be correct.
It says
they
they
do
wor-
worship one God.
They worship God, who is one, living and subsisting in himself, merciful, almighty, and the creator.
Sure, they're adumbrating the Muslim view. I don't know
No.
why this
No,
is so shocking.
Again,
You know
if,
what?
He, if he said they
Lumen
worship
Gentium-
a God, they'd be enumerating the Muslim view,
Tim,
but they say God.
Lumen
I think
Gentium,
it's right.
Lumen Gentium 16 says they
agree
adore
with
the one God. That's a term of worship.
I
That's
think,
a term
I think
of
they're
worship.
right.
The one God. They adore the one
agree.
God.
I agree
And
with
Pius X said this in his personal catechism.
So
and,
now you're
and-
deflecting
and
to it.
two medieval
You're
popes said it
deflecting.
too. You could take issue with the Roman Catholic position as an Orthodox. That's what you should do, but you can't say
Nor
that the church has changed.
Tim, the document
That's
is
all.
contradicting is the argument.
No,
we don't care about
the document
Pius
doesn't
X.
contradict Catholicism. It might contradict Jay Dyer or
I'm
no,
careful.
it-
The document itself contradicts what you said earlier. You
Does
said that God is-
Catholicism hold that Islam is the same as Christianity?
Do you know what a precept is? What a logical axiom is? Logical axioms are pre-scriptural. So literally, the sense-reference dichotomy or the concept of proportional cause. These are things which pre.
So sophistry,
preordained
deflections,
language.
getting
It's not
away from the
sophistry
argument.
to
It is
explain
sophistry.
something
is
that you don't
sophistry.
understand.
No, you didn't know that. You didn't
gonna
understand
say
this.
this.
You did 5 fallacies in a row.
You
dude.
said
Come on.
same. That would be
They adore.
heresy.
No,
The text
they
says
adore.
Thank you, God.
Because that's what the argument of the text is, Tim. They adore the one God in Lumen Gentium 16.
In order for
do adore the
your
one
argument
God.
to be
No,
correct,
they don't.
God
That
would
just
have to not be a
repeated you.
proper noun in
Okay,
that
let's-
sentence. And
I-
God is
I
a proper
believe
noun in that
that
sentence.
Muslims
We're gonna have to
the
mute
one God.
everybody.
No, they don't.
I believe that as a Pius X
Is he doing
Catholic.
it? Is he muting everybody? I don't. Okay. I don't know what y'all are arguing at this point.
Can I state?
I just hear noise. Just hear yelling. Well, the moment
I
don't hear
the
anything.
moment anyone talks, everyone just starts talking. And then when I was asking a question, you guys started having a different debate at the same time.
That's fair. That's a fair point. Can I say what I perceive the argument to be as somebody who's kind of outside of it?
Yeah,
at the moment?
let's just slow it down. Let him say it, and then we'll.
What I'm hearing from Jay is that passage reads that Muslims, by what the passage says, not literally, Muslims worship the same God that we do because it says they worship God, capital G, proper noun, and then that is followed up with a description of the Christian God.
Yes.
You are saying that this is correct because they do believe they worship the same God as us, therefore it's not incorrect. I would argue if it said they worship a God, you would be correct. But grammatically, it says they worship
Does
God.
a God exist outside of the one God?
It doesn't matter. They are
because
worshiping
another
something.
quote-
You're not talking about
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
You're
one
talking
second.
about
Let's-
reference.
Oh my God.
There's another quote that answers.
So yeah, read that next quote, but please don't interrupt.
So Lumen Gentium.
'Cause I have a thought on this.
So there's another statement beyond Nostra Aetate 3, which is Lumen Gentium 16. It says the plan of salvation includes those that acknowledge the Creator, first among whom are the Muslims. They profess the faith of Abraham, and together with us, Catholics, they adore the one true God. That refutes you.
That doesn't
Is it-
refute me.
hold
I agree
on,
with that.
hold on,
I
hold on.
hold that.
Together
Wait,
with
hold on,
us,
stop.
Catholics have
Okay,
together
guys,
with us,
guys,
refute your entire
hold on.
argument the last 20
Hold
minutes.
on,
not.
Hold on.
How does it
Absolutely
not?
not.
Together with us, Catholics.
I'll
Okay,
respond
wait.
afterwards.
Okay. Together with us, who are they referring to? Muslims?
Muslims and Catholics.
Okay.
Muslims and Christians. Yeah.
Catholics.
So
The Catholic
Catholics.
document.
the
Together
way-
with us.
This
Together with all
again,
monotheists.
Neither of our
It says
sects
together
believe
with
this.
us Catholics. What are you talking about?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you
Why
something.
are you
Okay,
lying?
I'm gonna say this right now, guys. To Orthodox and Anglican Catholic, everything you're saying is convincing me more and more of the Catholic argument.
How?
Because the position that this is taking, imagine it like this: there's a rock concert, an arena, stadium, and Catholics are all. Let's just say from the argument presented in this book, Catholics are all looking directly at the stage, and Muslims are in the back behind it, hearing a different bassy, garbled version of it. They're cheering for Freddie Mercury, but they're hearing some weird version of the song.
Exactly.
When I hear that, is what it's saying is that that all of these different religions are looking at they're doing things the wrong way towards the right God, and it's because there is only one God.
This is precisely the Catholic interpretation since Vatican II. Now, I admitted at
But-
the very outset that it's written by liberals, so it squints towards more conciliation, which is bad. But we have to say that Lumen Gentium, yeah, but after I'm done, Lumen Gentium and the other two sacred
I
constitutions
was
at
asking him,
Vatican
not
II.
you. I wasn't asking
Okay,
for
okay,
permission.
but don't just.
But you're using it
I
to
wasn't asking
interrupt.
for permission from
Tim's
you.
the Pope.
I'd be all for, by the way, muting while other guys are talking, because that's a really effective way of going.
It's still just yelling, though. You know what I mean?
But yeah, but I can sit here and be quiet. I'm just saying, as the Catholic,
It's, Trump shouldn't have been muted either.
yeah, agreed. No, as the Catholic, that there has to be a distinction between monotheism and polytheism on the basis of natural religion. Everyone out there who's listening to this knows. Okay, there are three Abrahamic religions, which was posited by Lumen Gentium. There's Judaism, Islam, Christianity. That this is, community college intro to religions 101. There are polytheisms. There are only three monotheisms in the history of the world. Now, there's only one correct monotheism, which posits a triune God. They say that they get this wrong. This is repeated throughout the sacred constitutions of Vatican II, that Jews and Muslims, even though they're monotheists, they get it wrong. They don't worship a triune God. This is said countless times in the documents. But That's why we don't have the index, they believe, or they falsely think that. That language is reserved in the Vatican II documents for the polytheisms. So all they're doing there, and it's written by Jesuit liberals, who are squinting toward a bad interpretation. They say correctly, they worship the one true God. Pius X says this in his personal catechism. He's a trad favorite. 2 other medieval popes say the exact same thing. Whether J. Dyer or Laura Lodge likes it, this is the Catholic. This is the Catholic view.
Well, but he's branding. It's good. It's
Okay,
good branding.
fair enough.
I'm trying to help you, Brand.
Hold on.
But with regard,
All right,
this is the last
yeah,
statement.
I'll
With regard to the polytheists, that's why they always say they falsely claim that, they falsely believe that, they falsely search for, they seek for. Okay, so the distinction is monotheist, polytheist.
This is correct, and everything Tim said there we would agree with, except that from the Orthodox perspective, we reject the whole idea that there are Abrahamic monotheistic faiths. So even though Muslims might see themselves as that, when we look at the Old Testament revelation, we believe that it is the Trinity explicitly revealing itself in the Old Testament. They don't know the name per se of the word Trinity, but it's Yahweh, his angel messenger, and his spirit are revealed. And in John 5-9, when Jesus debates with the Pharisees, who were the monotheists, he consistently says, you don't get the right God, you don't get the right picture. Abraham worshiped me, Jesus says in John 8. He says Moses wrote about him, meaning that Abraham and Moses had faith in Christ. This is a key point to undo the natural theology argument that the Old Testament posited a generic theism of just a one monotheistic God. If Abraham believed in the Trinity, then the whole Abrahamic religion thing falls apart. And Jesus says that to have faith in him makes you a child of Abraham. Galatians 3, Paul says the exact same thing. So when Vatican II acknowledges that they have the faith of Abraham together with us, we believe that is a denial of Jesus' teaching in John 8 that you can be a child of Abraham without faith in Christ.
I get
That's
that.
the argument.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, real quick. So
It just doesn't represent a change.
my response is kind of like, let's say we discover like we can make intercontinental ballistic missiles and very powerful ICBMs. The modern American ICBM is 1,250 times stronger than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It is also possible that it is also true that India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons that are substantially weaker because they have not yet discovered the means and the capability by which to build such a powerful bomb. So I think it could be said that you may have discovered hidden truths and the true path towards God and religion, and Muslims are effectively using a 1 kiloton bomb when you got a megaton bomb. That's why
I think the argument would be that Muslims are openly rejecting Christianity.
So the point is that like there are fundamentals that are absolutely essential to have access to God or to Christianity. So to deny, for example, the Trinity or the Incarnation puts us one outside of the bounds of Christianity at all.
But I agree that, like, look at it this way. There's a bouncer at a club, and he says, if you follow the rules, you can come into the club, and half the people follow the rules and get let in, and the other half says, that guy's telling us to go bash the windows out, and they get thrown out. They thought that's what the guy wanted. It's the same guy, but they're doing it wrong.
Well, we do throw people out.
Right. My point is, when Vatican II says they worship God, it's like the bouncer being like, yo, I never told those people to throw bricks at the building. What are they doing?
Well, the problem is not just worship, but Vatican II uses the term of adoration, which in Catholic theology is more specific than just a generic idea of natural theology. Adoration is something that's a specific term for like adoring the Eucharist in Catholic theology. And I would also point out that in my opening statement, I mentioned the fact that the Council of Vienne, which is a medieval Roman Catholic theology, which was involved in the Crusades, that attitude today that you see here is completely different than the attitude then in the Middle Ages, where it was the abominable sect of Muhammad in the council. They call crusades against the Muslims to protect the Holy Land.
Sure, attitudes change, dogma does.
No.
That's all I'm saying.
How can you be the abominable sect of Muhammad, but now
the abominable sect of Muhammad.
But now together with us they adore the one true God? That's the contradiction, Tim.
They could be the abominable sect of Muhammad and still worship one God.
No, they don't.
Yeah, even by reference,
with us,
to true God.
with us, Tim.
Jay, can I ask? These are both dogmatic councils, correct?
Yeah, they're from Vatican II.
Okay, then dogma contradicts.
Okay,
that's the argument. Dogma contradicts.
Okay, guys.
That's not true. That's simply and straightforwardly.
I got another.
Council of Vienne.
It was also untrue when you said we don't have ordination, but that apparently doesn't matter today.
Well, let's
We don't have ordination that's
go there.
apostolic.
Let's go there.
It goes back to Augustine.
How many years was the jihad? How many years was the jihad?
Augustine's goes back to Peter.
Is that how? So the jihad goes from Augustine
No.
to Peter?
We're having a separate debate again.
Oh, because I asked a question about how many years was the jihad?
You mean from the rise of Islam?
the literal like jihad conquest across North Africa, the Middle East, Spain?
Moving westward, it was basically 100 years, 632 to 732. On the eastern side, it's not quite as linear because there's the immediate Arab move into the north, and then the Turks convert and they come back down south.
632 to 750, 118 years was when
Battle of Tor is 732. That's kind of the reversal.
And then there were additional jihads in the 11th and 13th century for 200 years. And so I'm looking at the birth rate for Muslims, which is 3.1, as well as the hundreds of years of militaristic conquest under the banner of Islam. And like, how many battles of the Crusades were there?
There were a lot.
Like nowhere near as many as the Islamic Jihad.
I don't think that's true. I think there were a lot more battles. It really depends on how you define
Muhammad
that.
fought in 78 battles, 78
alone.
battles, wars.
There weren't that many in the Crusades as compared to the full total of Islamic Jihad. There were not as many battles during the Crusades.
Let's see, nine battles in the Crusades. Over 200 years.
I would argue against that. Maybe 9 major battles.
Yeah. And then
how are they defining battles?
I don't know. There were 80 to 100 military expeditions in the first Islamic Jihad.
Yeah.
So in terms of birth rate and expansion, I mean, Islam's doing way better. I'm not saying that makes it superior.
So I will say Islam, the ability of Islam to move after 732 was largely due to the Turks coming in at a time that could not have been less ideal for Christians. These two were, well, thankfully we were the same at the time, were in conflict. There was a schism that had happened about 20 years earlier. Then you get the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, and the Byzantine Empire collapses in on itself because everybody wants to be emperor. And ironically, the church wasn't strong enough to enforce one single emperor. In the West, the church wasn't strong enough to convince people, hey, we need to go drive the Turks out, and had to use Jerusalem as a little bit of a carrot on a stick. So the Muslims came in at a time when Christians were more divided than they'd ever been, and we were unable to resist the tide until 1095, when we were able to assemble an army large enough to go in and fight it. But at that point, the Franks didn't want to stay over there. The Saracens became too numerous, too powerful. It was a long period of strife that was largely caused by Christianity's inability to come together.
There was an argument a few years ago, maybe like 7 years ago, where a lot of people, including myself, made the argument that the U.S. would become a Muslim nation.
No.
Because Muslims have a substantially higher fertility rate than basically every other group, including Christians. And that combined with mass migration, you see the emergence of places like Dearborn, Michigan. Yep. However, with the recent trend towards Christianity among the Gen Z, and it's not just that conservatives and Christians had more kids, we're actually seeing an ideological shift. And I think a large portion of why we're seeing young Gen Z be more Christian is just because of their parents. But I think around half, we are actually seeing an ideological conversion, one of which is there was this really interesting shift from like the 2020 to like 23 or whatever, where Gen Z support for same-sex marriage collapsed. Like literally the same people polled at like 20 years old, then at 24 had an inverse opinion on gay marriage. So that, if combined with a reversal of the fertility rate decline, which may happen, we are seeing a lot of people start to have kids again, then I think the U.S. is on track to become a conservative Christian nation.
Probably.
In fact, one of the global elite books that I lectured through was Jacques Attali's book, Brief History of the Future, in 2006. He warned that for the technocratic elite, one of the things they had to be concerned with was the possibility of a rising traditional Christian ethos in the West and in the U.S. So they actually wargamed that out, and a few years ago, the Saudis were noted for, I think, putting 60-something billion into funding mosques in the U.S. and Islamic education centers. So I think they were really pushing for that. But Islam has had a rough go on the internet, especially in the last couple of years. They're losing bad, and then a lot of younger people are turning towards Christianity.
So I have a question for you guys, just for all Christians. Is it one of the core tenets to go and spread the religion?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you guys view yourselves as doing that? Mm-hmm. I would say yes, 100%.
In this current present moment right now,
I think
Or
in just
in
general, I think
yeah.
I'll talk about
Yeah,
your
in general.
religion on large platforms to large groups of people.
Yeah.
Certainly, and evangelization sounds different than the internecine squabbling between Catholics and Orthodox. Certainly, yeah. I think I'm sure all of us try to do that in different fora and platforms. I certainly do also.
Yeah, I mean, like I was like, Islam is having a hard time because they had a really strong push in the 2010s online, and a lot of people were getting into Islam. But now, a lot of Christians are doing pretty intense, hardcore apologetics. Like we had that debate with Daniel Hikikachu and Ijaz together, me and Sam Shamoon on Fresh and Fit. That got millions of views, and it was like 90% just dominated.
I mean, Russell Brand.
Yeah.
You know, so I in the skateboard community, it's degenerate garbage mostly. These pro skateboarders have always been scuzzy, drug abusing. Now there's a bunch of them that are getting baptized.
Yeah.
I'm not going to single anybody out, but I was surprised to find.
Didn't skating get like the corporations try to take it over, like make it woke, and then people are reacting to that now?
Well, so with skateboarding, what happened was the industry completely collapsed because there's no young people anymore. And the stewards of the industry failed to cultivate a new generation of skateboarders. So what happens then is, as of today, more than half of all professional, like all skateboarders, active skateboarders, I don't say professional, are over 30. What happens? When the water goes down, it exposes the scum in the reef. And so now some of the most prominent voices in the industry are degenerate, cringy, rage bait. And so what happens is these companies try to figure out how to sell to whoever they can. And you end up with advertisements, or there may be an inverse correlation here that when the companies started promoting, you know, like men pretending to be women doing weird fetish poses, and they are, it's not a joke. Young guys say, I don't have anything to do with this. Because scooting doesn't do that. Scooting doesn't. And that's growing massively in popularity. All the skills are now, in terms of action sports, are going in that direction in BMX. And this is what happens when, you know what I think it is, to relate this to the conversation, abject degeneracy freaks the average person out no matter what.
Exactly.
No matter who they are, where they're from.
Yeah.
It is a shock to the system. So skateboarding started promoting, there's one individual who's a morbidly obese man who's trans and does fetish, like weird sexualized fetish poses, but it's like a big fat guy. And a lot of young men are like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I think now we're seeing a lot of young men shift towards Christianity. That's in the polls. That may be a good explanation as to why skateboarding is struggling to market itself to a younger generation, because all the big magazines are basically being like, you know, here's the trans and the queer stuff. And
it's not internal to one culture or another subculture. This is what's at large in the general popular culture, is a great reawakening. Essentially, secular humanism, I'm not the first one to say it. It's reasonably obvious 10 years into it. Secular humanism has consumed itself, and people are looking for what's perennial and what's true. And it turns out that a lot of young kids are finding Jesus-based. And so when they're returning to Christianity, they're looking for what they take to be a based version of it, which is why they're leaving Protestantism in droves and going to greater structure. More and more structure is all I'm saying. So they're going to Orthodox, or 2024 was Roman Catholicism's, I think, greatest year of re-embrace of the church popularly.
How many people leave
in the last
Roman Catholicism for every person who joins it?
You tell me.
I believe it's something.
I'm not going to tell you that.
I think it's something like 6 to 8.
Yeah. Well,
everyone.
Last year was the best year in the new evangelization, which is what John Paul II set out to do, using media, using the self-immolation of popular.
Well, I Googled it, and I'm sorry, I chat GPT'd it, and it says that Protestants are converting to Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy.
We are. It should be clear that
you
most of them are
disputed that a second
No,
ago.
I did not dispute that.
I think you did.
I did not.
Let's see, 155 per parish from 22 to 23.
I said leaving
That doesn't
in
help.
droves.
That's not a good metric. There's no real good metric. They say 78% surge in Orthodox conversions, but again, we don't have the actual hard numbers. Orthodoxy is seeing 155 converts per church, of which 65 are from Protestant backgrounds.
Yeah, I think Protestantism has a major issue right now with, first of all, with how divided we are. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that the Episcopal Church, many of the Presbyterian churches have totally lost their way.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why the Anglican Catholic Church exists. I think Protestants need to really look in the mirror and ask ourselves what the hell we're doing.
Let me say this. When I was looking up different denominations, ChatGPT volunteered unto me that the Episcopal Church was shrinking.
It's bad.
Like when I said like list the churches by fertility rate, it was like, as Episcopal is shrinking.
All the woke churches are basically adopting sterility. So they sterilize themselves with their policies, and then they don't have future generations, and they die out.
Yeah, the conservative Protestant churches aren't as good at marketing. We are not nearly as good at telling people we exist. The Roman and Catholic and the Orthodox churches are both very visible. I think that's why you see so many Protestants converting right now. I think if more Protestants were aware of churches like the Anglican Catholics, there would be higher numbers of people converting to the conservative Protestant churches as well. But we suffer from that problem of being at schism with ourselves in so many cases.
There are a lot of churches that fly the pride flags, even Catholic churches.
Yeah.
They're popping up. They tend to be in liberal areas. And I view that largely as the church is looking at the political views of the community around them. And they're probably saying to themselves, in 1 year, this church will be a coffee shop unless we get more parishioners. What do we have to do? Market whatever they want to hear.
But the woke churches die. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
It doesn't. But I'll say this too.
They die and the faith dies with them.
And many people have said get woke, go broke, but I do believe while that's largely true, there's an inverse of go broke, get woke, in that a lot of companies try to adopt. They try to adopt wokeness as a marketing tactic to try and get, but they don't understand hippies don't have money.
No, it's a boomer marketing appeal that was really. I'll speak to the Catholic position. It was really popular during and around Vatican II, and they thought that kids wanted monkeys music and long hair and mass and tambourines and shit, and they simply didn't. What they wanted was what's perennial and true, and that's really what's
let me say this. There's this oft quoted study. You have to look it up. Where they told people, come in. It's a study. You're gonna answer some questions, and then afterwards you get a free T-shirt. Mm-hmm. People came in the first group, answered the questions, and as they were leaving, they were given a free T-shirt. They were then on the way out asked, how do they feel about their experience? The next group came in, answered the questions, were then given a choice between one of 3 T-shirts, blue, green, or red. They then made a choice. They were then on the way out asked how they felt. The people who were given the choice felt worse off. They felt regret. They picked the wrong color. The people who weren't given a choice went, wow, free T-shirt. But when they had to choose between the colors, it actually made them feel worse. And this is often cited as in many instances, not all, choice actually stresses people out and makes them feel anxiety. They don't like it. And so a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people really just want to be told what to do. And and I've said this before, because there's this mentality in the United States that being a follower is a bad thing. You want to be a leader. And I reject that. There's a requirement for both leaders and followers. And they try to insult you in modern media if you are just a follower of someone, because you have to be the leader. And I say, when the king is standing before all of his men in the fields, ready to die for the world that they believe in and the things they love, those followers of the king are no less dignified simply because they're not the king. In fact, without them, there is no king. So being a follower isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think modern society tries to tell you not to do that.
Absolutely.
Be rogue. No, it's perfectly fine if you want to say, listen, I spend my days taking care of my family. You take care of the politics. I believe in you to do the right thing. Don't screw me over. There's nothing wrong with it.
Modernity is enlightenment, right? Enlightenment effect. So the Enlightenment was all about individual atomistic liberties, which were premised on the idea that there's no authority, there's no hierarchy. Hence why they were opposed to church and state, monarchy and church, basically.
Yeah. And I will say this too. One of the debates we often have in the political arena around religion is that there's this romanticized fake liberal view that the founding fathers believed in this hyper-liberal society where anyone could say whatever they wanted. They had blasphemy laws back then. Right. Even when the founding father says the right to speech shall not be infringed, of course, no one in this room thinks you can go out there and say, and take the Lord's name in vain. That would be a crime. They meant you could go and have political conversations in a pub. And so when you look at the context around the Constitution, 1789 and all that, they weren't literally saying anyone can march to the street to the tombs of thousands of people and block roads. They were saying if you have a meeting in your city peacefully to have conversations, the government can't shut you down because the crown wanted to shut them down. But these people think the founding fathers were a bunch of like liberal atheists.
Yeah, they're like Sam Harris or something like that.
Yeah, nope.
Eight
Nope,
of
they'd lock
the-
you up for blasphemy.
8 of the 13 states had establishments of Christian religions, and the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was written assuming that all 13 would, and what the Establishment Clause means literally was that Congress and Congress alone shall not make a law respecting a disestablishment of religion. Congress wasn't allowed to disestablish the state legislature established sects of Christianity. That's literally what it means, and it was a Masonic U.S. Supreme Court in 1947 in a case called Everson versus Board of Ed that literally reversed the meaning and incorporated the First Amendment.
Speaking of which, like Enlightenment Freemasonic values, how do you reconcile Freemasonry with Christianity?
What about Freemasonry is in conflict with Christianity?
How about Albert Pike's teachings?
Albert Pike is not recognized as influential by most Masons.
Okay, so
His
you're telling
teachings
me
are
that-
non-essential.
You're telling me
Are
the
you a
morals and dogma.
I am a Freemason, yeah.
Morals and dogma.
I'll admit I've had my questions because I have run into things
You're
in the
telling me
Scottish
morals
Rite
and
that I
dogma is
disagree
not used in Scottish Rite.
with. No, it is used in the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite and the southern
So it's
jurisdiction
not
of the
influential.
Scottish
So
Rite.
he has a giant statue in D.C., but he's not influential.
He was influential for a number of other reasons. Secularly, he
What
was
about
a
Manly-
Civil
what about
War
Manly-
general. He was a accomplished ethnographer.
Okay, what about Manly P. Hall? Is he also doesn't count?
Manly P. Hall admitted that he wrote everything that you have a problem with before he became a Freemason.
What Masons do count?
Well, it depends on what you're
philosophy.
talking about with Freemasonry. I mean,
the philosophy.
Freemasonry is the first 3 degrees. That's it.
Or the philosophy?
What is
That's
it?
not true. There's 32nd, 33rd degree.
There are in the Scottish Rite, which is appellate to Freemasonry. It's like getting a merit badge.
Yeah, but I don't care about what your terms are for these different sects. When
These
they
aren't-
have,
these
when
aren't
they
my
have,
terms.
They have a naturalistic bent and ethos. For example, Pike says that.
Pike is irrelevant to me.
No, he's not. Well, he's irrelevant to you, but not to the history of Freemasonry.
No, Pike is irrelevant to everything
To the
outside
history
of the
of Freemasonry.
Pike is irrelevant
to
to
the
every-
history of Freemasonry generally.
Who's
I don't.
the,
not
who's the
you,
Freemason
dude.
here? Who's the one who knows what he's talking about? It's
That's
me.
an appeal to authority.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I'm citing your
I'm trying
sources.
to. You're not
You're
citing my
citing
sources.
yourself. Albert Pike is a source
Al-
for
Albert-
Freemasonry, not
For-
you, dude.
No, Albert Pike is a source for the
For
southern
Freemasonry
for
in
the
general.
southern jurisdiction
You're
of
telling
the
me that
Scottish
he's not
Rite
famous in
of
the world of
Freemasonry.
Freemasonry. Okay,
I'm
Giuseppe
telling-
Mazzini. How about Giuseppe Mazzini? Does he count?
Is he P2?
No, he's in the Grand Orient Lodge.
Grand Orient, not regular.
So what counts for you?
The 3 degrees of the craft lodges, mainly split between England and the United States.
So the York Rite, is that what?
The York Rite, like the Scottish Rite, is appellate and is not held in union with all Freemasonic ideals.
So in the British Empire, what was the function of Freemasonry in the British Empire, in your view?
It was a social club.
Are you a speculative Mason?
All Masons are speculative Masons.
No, they're not. The original Masons were
You know,
they were stone workers. They weren't speculative Freemasons.
Yes,
and-
it did originate from operative Masons in the late 1300s as a Catholic organization, which very explicitly held that you must love the church with God and the church with all
that's
your
not
heart.
speculative Freemasonry.
All right.
It was the origin
No,
of
it's not.
speculative Freemasonry.
No, it's not.
Gentlemen.
Yes, the
Roman
Regius
Catholic-
poem,
the
the
Catholic-
Regius poem,
the
the Regius
Culture
poem.
The Catholic Church has
Freemasonry
condemned you for
versus-
centuries.
7
Why?
times. 7 different
Why?
times.
For
It's
centuries.
speculative
Why?
Mason.
Why?
Centuries.
Why? Tell me
All right.
why. I know why. Do you? Do you know why?
I do know why, 'cause
do you
I've
know
read-
why the Pope in
I've read,
1738?
you shut up. I've read the papal
No, you've been
documents.
interrupting me while asking me
Because your
questions.
answers are stupid.
Okay.
They're
They're
not
dumb.
stupid. You don't know what you're talking
They're
about.
dishonest.
No, do you know
Okay,
why?
guys,
It was
guys.
because they met in
lying
secret. It was
because
no.
you're acting as if
1738. In Humanum.
Modern Janus.
Yeah, in that one. What was the reason he
Make
gave?
sure to watch Timcast IRL tonight at 8 p.m. Guys, we're over time.
Okay.
And if we had more time, I'd say let's get into Masonry.
Dude, I'm happy to come back and do
let's,
Masonry.
Let's do another one on the Freemasonry.
Even just from the historical perspective.
I think
'Cause he
that-
doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, okay. I think.
Yeah, but you're lying because
Okay, I'm
not lying.
Albert Pike is very influential. in
Albert
Guys,
Pike is not
guys.
influential
Yes, he
outside of the
is.
southern jurisdiction of the Scottish
That's
Rite.
Thanks for hanging
largely
out.
Masonry.
All right. Do you want to shout anything out before we go?
Yes. You can find me at my website, jasonanalysis.com. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me usually the 4th hour of Alex Jones every Friday. You can find me writing the Sam Hyde Show and find me on Twitter.
Yeah. My name is Aiden Mattis. I'm the host of the Lore Lodge, History Unhinged, and the Weird Bible podcast. I do want to quickly say that the Anglican Church does not necessarily agree with me about Freemasonry before I get in trouble for that. But yeah, that's where I'm leaving this. You can find me here on YouTube.
Timothy Gordon on Twitter. I'm at Timothyology, TimothyEeology, and I'm on YouTube as well, Timothy Gordon, doing a show called Rules for Retrogrades. Thanks for having us on.
Right on. This was fun.
Yell at each other.
Yeah. The most heated debate we've had. Who'd have thought? We're going to be back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. Don't miss it. Bring your friends. Tell your grandma. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all then.